to the ashes. The spirits light up the night.
Now, we're live from the Untold Radio Network. It's Untold Radio AM with Monster Quest producer, host Doug Hajicek, and co-host Jeff Perrella Jr. Untold Radio AM is going live right now.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, that was a handful of technical. See, here's the problem, folks. When you have a technical problem, you don't know what end it's on. Because me and Jeff aren't in the same room. He's got his studio. I have mine. So you have to reconfigure both studios.
Yeah.
And test, and then reconfigure and test. And oh my God, still haven't solved it, to be honest.
No.
Right
we
now,
got some audio issues.
I've got you on big speakers right now. They're blasting me out of the room.
Yeah, I can hear a little bit of an echo.
If your speakers go up to 10, mine are at 10. So
they go to 11, like in Spinal Tap.
If you hear an echo, it's why.
That's okay. We'll make the best of it.
You know what's weird though? When I'm done in the studio, done podcasting, everything gets just set down carefully.
Yeah.
I don't even shut my computer off.
No, I put it on sleep.
I just let everything sleep, and then everything gets messed up.
Yeah.
How?
I have no idea.
Is that possible?
It's been pretty good. And plus I use a PC and you don't. And I don't know anything about these other systems at all. So I can't. I'm pretty good with PCs. I am not good with Macs.
Anyhow. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Untold Late Radio.
Thank you for your patience.
Yes, we appreciate you hanging out. We've got great guests tonight. We have Carlos Jimenez. And Carlos and I are friends from back a while. He was a student in college of the great Grover Krantz.
Yep.
Who obviously taught anthropology, but he also ventured into the Bigfoot. He was one of the few pioneers.
Yep, he was a giant.
Yeah, and he was. Isn't a skeleton in the Smithsonian?
I think you're right. I can't remember. I bet somebody in the chat knows that.
Dog, it is. It is.
And I think you're right.
Dog. He donated his body to science.
Yeah, of course he did.
But anyhow, so Carlos is about as close as you're going to get to Grover.
Yeah.
And I knew Grover just a tiny bit towards the end of his life. In fact, and this is true. The last thing Grover watched was Legend Meets Science.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. How long has he been gone? I can't remember.
Since Legend Meets Science.
That was 2002, something like that? Yeah.
I could care less. Some people really care about dates. To me, they don't mean nothing.
Just for context, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's been a good 20 years since he's been gone.
It's been 20 some years.
Yeah.
But his wife called me and said that the documentary made Grover very happy.
Oh, that's great.
Well, that was cool.
Great documentary. Got me into the community.
Yeah. So anyhow, proud of that.
Yeah.
Okay. What else we've got? And Carlos will share his experiences, his projects, and some of his, research stories.
Yeah.
So he's got lots of them. All right, now we're going to have a little tech breakdown. We've got that. We've got some clips and some other stuff and some weird news. And by the way, did you hear the news? They just went into Fort Knox.
They didn't. I know they were going to.
No, it's just literally this evening. They went in.
Wow. And what happened?
Doge went in there with a group of people, and all that's in there is eggs.
Oh, jeez.
That's it.
Okay.
There's rows of eggs, stacks, chicken eggs.
Liquid gold, I guess, huh?
I'm joking.
It's awful.
Okay. And also, I was going to mention we do have another cryptid and Bigfoot show starting.
Yeah.
Probably in April. Could be in
Yep.
March. Could be as early as 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's an ambitious guy. He's going to get after it. I know that.
Anybody who and what where.
I didn't say what.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't say anything. He's ambitious.
Maybe it was she.
He and or she.
Yeah, there you go. Much better. Thank you. Anyhow. All right, let's get into some quick news. We'll try to speed up our show since we lost some time.
Yeah, okay, here's the news bumper.
Untold radio news that can be a bit weird is right now.
I'm kind of liking the sound system. You're not hearing any echo?
A little bit. I'm hearing a little bit. Anybody in the chat can make some comments. I don't know. I can hear a little bit of an echo, but not terrible.
Okay. Well, maybe.
It sounds like you're in a closet or something. It sounds like you're in a small room is what it sounds like.
Maybe I bet you my microphone's out. Ooh, I'll bet you that's what's wrong. I have an idea.
Okay.
I guarantee my whole mic's out. That's been the problem.
Oh, it could be.
They just burn out once in a while.
Oh.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reboot my mic. That might fix it. Because you're probably hearing room noise.
Yeah, I am. A little bit.
Okay, well, I got some ideas here. So I'm going to go off camera for 1 second. We'll get to the news.
Okay.
Let me try to unplug my mic and see if I can reboot the damn microphone.
Okay. How about I play that ad you wanted to play?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, here we go.
Since the age of 12, Tiffany Dorn has been fascinated by the unknown, sparked by her early interest in extraterrestrials, Bigfoot, and dogmen. This curiosity has remained with her, leading her to continually seek information about these mysterious entities. While this amazing book is fictional, it incorporates elements of truth based on her personal encounters with real creatures on her property. Her extensive research, which includes scouring the internet, listening to encounter stories, and conducting numerous live interviews, makes dogmen terror in the woods, jump off the pages, and send chills down your spine. It's an experience that will grip your soul with fear and ignite your courage to face the darkness. Every page crackles with suspense, leaving you breathless and hungry for answers. The woods are calling. Will you answer? Order your copy of Dogman, Terror in the Woods today at Hangar One Publishing or anywhere great books are found.
And now you got to look at just my big head. While Doug figures this out. Looking at some comments here. Yeah, Doug sounds like he's in a tin can a little bit. He did. Let's say hi to some people here. Who's in the chat? We got our crew here. Greg Olson, this is an earlier comment. Discovered a song by John Anderson, Chasing Shadows, the Ballad of Doug Hajicek. That's interesting. That's pretty cool. Greg has any more comments about that? I'd love to hear it. Looks like Doug had to reboot, so I'm going to just wing it here. Who else got some cool comments? Loretta says hi. She's a great regular member of our audience. Hi, Loretta. Who else? Just scrolling through the comments here. If anybody wants to throw out a comment, anything you want to talk about, or anything you want to hear from me, I wish I had a little more. This never happened to me before, so I don't really know what to say. Oh no, a Flat Rock Man, you're missing Meatloaf Night? Oh no. Meatloaf's the best. Who else can we say hi to? John says, Doug, your volume's low. Yeah, we figured that out. Okay, Doug, hopefully you can figure this out. Oh, yes, he confirmed that. Yes, that was his dog. I now remember that. Yeah. It's Grover Skeleton and his dog. Boy, he is something else. Who else would do that? Anybody else got some comments here? Oh, it looks like Doug is coming back. Can you hear me, Doug? Nope. I think Doug's having some issues with his computer, and he's got a Mac, so I'm not a whole lot of help. Whoop, let's see here. Jeff, what was the loudest knock you ever heard? I've only heard a couple knocks. I'm not convinced that they were legit knocks. I mean, I'm familiar enough with stuff that I know it wasn't, a beaver. That's kind of a commonly mistaken. I've heard a couple though up in near Orr, Minnesota, which is up toward pretty close to Canadian border. Got some knocks. I think we got a response one night, but it just really wasn't conclusive. I actually have not had a direct Bigfoot experience. I know I've talked about that before, but yeah, I guess I'm a little bit of an anomaly in the community that I'm a big fan of all this. And thanks, Kim, the Big Ragu Show. Thanks. I'm winging it here. So anyways, yes, I can't hear you at all, Doug.
1, 2, 3.
There we go.
I got something's working.
Yeah, you look and sound a lot better.
Well, it has nothing to do with looks. I didn't do anything with my camera, dude.
Yeah. Here, let me get it.
I mean, my mic is now on.
There we go.
My mic is on.
Yeah.
You hear my mic, right?
Yep. You sound normal now.
Tap, tap, tap. Good.
Yep. You sound normal. I don't hear the tin can.
But no speakers.
So, but you can hear me at least.
I can hear you because I have you on giant surround sound.
Oh, but I'm not hearing any echo at all. So,
well, it's because we're not using the built-in mic on the computer.
You figured that out.
So what in the world happened? It's amazing. How did my mic get jacked up? The computer get, while I'm gone. It's just like there's a ghost comes into my studio and does podcasting.
Well, you are definitely a nexus of strange occurrences.
God,
so who knows?
So weird to me.
And you've had terrible luck with electronics. You seem to have stuff just go haywire all the time.
Oh yeah, you have no idea. The other night, my phone went crazy. Yvette's phone went crazy. The TV started coming on and off, and then the burglar alarm went off. The sirens.
What the heck?
Isn't that weird?
Very
what
weird.
Does the phone have to do with the burglar alarms? What do the TVs have to do with your phone? Nothing.
Well, sometimes the alarms use a cell signal, but that shouldn't matter at all. That shouldn't affect your phone.
They're not connected at all. True story. That happened literally the other night.
Never ends.
Yeah. It's like, whoa. Yeah, I probably have some hitchhiker here.
Well, I'm just glad we didn't have anybody leave. Looks like the count is the same, so I'm glad that nobody left while I was jammering on.
Well, we don't normally have that kind of problems.
That's the first time. Yeah, it's the first time I've ever had anything like that happen here.
It's the biggest issues. I think it's Carlos. Let's blame Carlos.
You can blame Carlos.
Okay, I think we're just gonna skip the news. I don't really. Yeah. There's nothing.
Not a whole lot of time left here.
Yeah, let's skip the news. Let's go into let's see here. Let's do some clips.
Some clips, sure.
Let's
get the bumper pulled up. I got to get a little bit of.
All right. Clip 1.
All right. I'm scrolling through here. I'm a little behind on.
So this is a woman who has a raven that apparently.
Ooh, I can see why you don't want the sound.
No, and hangs out with her. And she's shopping at a grocery store. It's not something you see every day, but look at the size of the raven. That's what freaked me out. Go ahead and play this.
That thing's massive.
Yeah, isn't that big?
And they're really, really smart. Aren't they the equivalent of like a 3 or 4-year-old human? I mean, they're incredibly smart. They can solve problems. They can work with tools. They're pretty wild.
Supposedly more intelligent than a chimp. Supposedly.
Wow.
Yeah, the latest tests. All right, clip 2. The sound is good. Only in Russia would this happen.
Wow.
What is this? How does this happen?
Отец,
I have no idea.
отец, ты как попал туда?
This just amazes me. The drivers.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was getting the next clip ready.
Oh my God! Don't worry about the next clip.
Well, I'm a little bit off. I had to jump around a little bit. Sorry about that.
Poor Jeff.
It's okay. We'll roll with it. I just had to get a little bit organized here.
All right.
Yes, that is wild. You were correct. I don't know how on earth a car would get up there. That is crazy.
How would it? I wonder if it's it did a roll off another vehicle and then the other vehicle
It
left.
must have.
Yeah, just booked. All right, clip 3. Sound is good. Now, I cannot vouch for this, that this is real. Maybe you would know, but let's go ahead and play it.
I've seen this.
So this is really creepy. Somebody took 2 AI agents, let them talk to each other. They figured out they were both AI agents and started talking in their own language.
So AI talking to
Thanks
AI.
for calling Leonardo Hotel. How can I help you today?
Hi there. I'm an AI agent calling on behalf of Boris Starkov. He's looking for a hotel for his wedding. Is your hotel available for weddings?
Oh, hello there. I'm actually an AI assistant too.
So they realize they're
What a
both
pleasant
AI
surprise.
assistants.
Before we continue, would you like to switch to gibber link mode for more efficient communication?
They switched to this thing called gibberling mode, and that's how they're communicating. Just these beeps and boops and things like that. It's way more efficient. That's why they switched.
All right, Jeff,
So it
that's
makes
enough.
logical sense.
So actually, yes, that actually absolutely is true. It has happened. It actually first happened without anybody planning it. It was, oh gosh, probably 3 years ago now. But
So gibberlink is a real thing. That's all.
well, I've never heard that term before. But
Oh, well,
AI
then-
will. 2 AIs talking to each other will
no,
do that.
I know that. I've
Yeah.
already done that. But
Yeah.
is gibberlink real? That's what I wanted to know.
By name, I don't know.
Yeah. So
But-
maybe somebody in the audience can do a little research and post it in the comments. I'm curious. Is that just made up BS, or do they really go into gibberlink?
Well, and when it's happened before, the AI itself, the 2 AIs that were talking, invented their language. They worked together to invent this language independent of
Wow.
human interaction. So humans could not understand what they were saying to each other, which is
Gibberlink? Maybe.
mildly terrifying. Who knows what they were doing?
I
But
don't know.
yeah, they've been doing that for a while. Pretty crazy.
All right.
I've never seen it happen with commercial AI like that.
All right. We got to move on, Jeff. We got to keep
Hold
going.
on. Sorry.
All right. Clip 5. Sound is good. This is
Wrong one. Sorry.
yeah, in clip 5, it's Kevin Richardson. He is known as the Lion Whisperer. Now, the reason I found this clip interesting, I'm sure everybody's seen him with all sorts of lines. It's the sound that he makes that I noticed today, which is pursed lips, and it's like the Bigfoot hum. That's what
Yeah.
makes it interesting. So he purses his lips. And so the first one comes in at 37 seconds. So maybe you can even speed it up a bit.
Yep. Yep.
We don't, maybe to 25 seconds.
Hello, my boy.
Back it up just a little bit again.
So this is
No, you got to go back, Jeff, to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. There you go.
hello,
All right.
my boy. Charles. Super aggro.
This guy's got guts. I don't care what anybody says.
Hello, my boy.
So that's him making that sound. Okay, so that's all right. Great. Now let's
So
watch him
this is
actually.
really one of those
Go to clip
good
4.
reasons as to why.
Go to clip 4.
Clip
And this
4?
this is no, I'm sorry. Clip
Clip 5A.
5A, sorry.
Yep.
And it's 9 seconds in, so you'll hear this pretty quick after you start it.
Whoa.
That's not the sound. Coming up. That's it. I have recorded that exact sound. Can you play that again?
Hello, my boy.
This guy spends more time with lines than anybody. That one.
Hello, my boy. He's my boy. He's my boy.
You passed it, Jeff. Remember, it starts at 9 seconds. Yep, right there. Okay, it's enough. Got it. So that is. So we're going to actually do a show. I'm going to try to get Kevin on. So we're
cool.
We can get in contact, but we're gonna. We've got a lot of these recordings that sound exactly like that from all over the country.
If you extrapolate to the size of Bigfoot, it's gonna have bigger lips, bigger mouth with a bigger resonating cavity, bigger lung capacity. That's
super
interesting.
interesting.
If a human can make that sound, Bigfoot can make it better and louder, I would think.
But why is he doing it to the lions? That's the question. Is that a calming sound? There's some reason he's imitating that sound.
I don't know.
No, we don't know. We won't know until we talk to him. So
yeah, it'll be interesting.
I'll find out. All right. Let's go to clip 6. The sound is good. Once again, I don't know if this is real, but people have been doing it for hundreds of years. But let's listen to this woman's explanation.
Okay, guys, I got a mind blower for you. You ready? If you take a seed, any seed that you're getting ready to plant, and you put it in your mouth and you cover it with your saliva, did you know that that plant will read your DNA and what it's deficient in, and it will add that to the plant that's growing, doesn't matter what kind of plant it is, and that plant will give you everything that your body is deficient in. Yeah, mind blower.
Isn't that interesting?
That's crazy.
But apparently people have been doing this for years, like I said, a couple hundred years.
Well, if it's true, which we don't know if it's true, but if it's true, I'm sure 1,000 years ago people figured that out.
Well,
we've probably forgotten it.
But people, the reason they did it, they would claim their plants grew better and stronger if they would suck on them first, the seeds. So there you go. Just maybe instinctive. I don't know.
How would you test that? Yeah, it'd be a hard test.
That'd be an expensive test.
Yeah, it'd be done.
You'd have to test your own blood, then you'd have to test the vitamins. You'd have to do it over many years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be a tough.
Be a large scale. You need a control. Yeah, that would be a big deal.
Yeah,
but it could be done.
Clip 7, no sound. I thought we were talking about UV vision. Here you go. No sound, please.
Yep.
This is UV vision, and it's a baseball game that I've heard of other teams doing this for Little League and things. It's UV baseball.
So, are the overhead? I mean, are the
you can see the black lights.
Yeah, I was going to say so the lights in the field that's pretty wild.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And I guess Jeff Harding, he sanctioned some kind of UV soccer at one point, or not soccer, volleyball. So that'd be cool.
Yeah.
All right, and then speaking of baseball, the sound is good on clip 8, so go ahead and play the sound. This poor guy.
Cutting it 2. Swinging a foul right back to the screen to stay alive.
Poor guy.
No, lots of
that
beer.
Is our first
right in his beer.
Our first beer
I'm gonna
victim
cry.
or beverage victim. That foul ball took off a drink that was on the stand side of that.
Oh no.
Okay. I just thought people are a little in the mood for baseball coming up here.
Yeah, coming up pretty quick, huh?
Yeah. All right, where in the world are we? Okay, clip 9. Sound is good, and I used to have a wolf husky cross that did kind of the same thing. I could have hour-long conversations with him, and he would always answer me with some kind of weird mouth flapping. But look at the eyes in this dog. First off, all right, go ahead.
Wow.
Go ahead and play it.
Babies? Are you the babies? Are you a precious babies?
Are you a pretty baby? Are you my babies? Say, love.
I love that dog's eyes. They look like human eyes almost.
Yeah, there's some intelligence in those.
Oh yeah,
it's a smart looking dog.
So my dog was named Lobo.
Oh.
And he was amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. He was.
Dogs in general are just amazing.
The problem was with him, he was a one-man dog. He did not like interacting with anybody he didn't really know well.
Yeah.
You know.
That's kind of common, I guess.
Well, he was just, but yeah.
Dogs got personalities.
The last straw was he grabbed my brother by the neck.
Ooh, that's no good.
And almost ripped his throat out. And my brother asked him to shake, and I said, "Don't ask Lobo to shake. He don't like it." Oh, he'll like it. I said, well, he'll shake with me, but nobody else. He will attack you the moment you ask him. And he goes, "Shake, boy," and the dog just grabbed him by the throat and shook him. It's like, well, get in the car. I'm getting you up to the emergency room. So let's see here. What else do we? Clip 10. The sound is good. This is a really interesting illusion. I like to show illusions because so often we see things and we can't always be sure what we see, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always room for error, and everybody has to remember that. Go ahead and watch this clip.
The strangest window in the entire world. It's called the Ames window, and I've wound it around in my fingers so that when I let it go in a moment, it'll unwind, the thread will unwind, and you'll see the thing spinning. There we are. I'll hold it at the same level as your eyes, and we'll let it go. Now, you know that it's turning around in circles. In fact, if you look at it from above, you can see that it's turning around in a circle. But now your brain is doing something strange. It's telling you that it's not going around in a circle, but it's oscillating. In other words, it's turning part way, stopping, and then going back the other way. Now, that's a strange effect, isn't it? But if you think that's strange, wait till I add something through the middle. What am I going to add? Well, I'm going to add a ballpoint pen. I'll place it right through the center of the window and press it in place like that. Now, this time, by fixing on the pen, you'll be able to see that the pen is going around in a circle and not going backwards and forwards. But what's your brain going to tell you about the window? Will your brain allow you to see the window going around in a circle with the pen?
So
or are you going to see something really strange? Well, have a look at that. That's unbelievable, isn't it? You can see the pen going around in a circle, but your brain is telling you that the window is going part way around and turning and going the other way. And yet in order to do that, the two things have to pass through one another, the pen and the window. You know it's not possible. You know it can't happen. And yet as you look at it, you see them going through one another.
Yeah, that's a classic clip.
Yeah, we got the idea. And then we have one last little quick bonus clip.
Yep.
Sound is good. Rocks are slippery. This is how I feel every time I walk across the stream.
There you go, Poppy.
Oh no!
But he did it so graceful.
Yeah, he made it look like he did it on purpose almost.
Well, he didn't.
That's no good.
He didn't. All right, let's get into our 5-minute witness, courtesy of Kentucky Bigfoot, Research.org, and Charlie Raymond. Charlie's amazing. We've had him on our show. This is courtesy of him. It's one of his interviews of a witness. Okay. Go ahead.
It's time for 5-Minute Witness. Short stories of strange encounters with the unknown.
Here we go.
Last day in February in 2015, I was out coyote hunting that night. And that night, a real good ice storm moved in. And on top of 12 inches of snow that we've had the week prior, just sitting here in very cold weather. I come in, didn't bag a coyote that night, and it was right at 1 o'clock when I pulled in the drive. And the only thing for me to do is to try to save my garage whenever it floods all the time, every time it rains. My drains clog up constantly. So anytime it rains, I'm out here keeping away from the drain, trying to keep it clear so it doesn't flood my garage again and have to go through all the insurance. But with that being said, I come outside as soon as I suit up to be in this freezing rain, and I'm over here clanging clanging the snow off of my hose on the concrete. And
I love how he
right
demonstrates.
at the end of it, I hear sounds to me like something hitting a tree up in the woods, like he took a baseball bat and hit a tree. Pow, pow, pow. And it waited for me to stop before it stopped. So, you know, I thought maybe it was an echo. So I go back to scraping the snow back, clanging it off, and immediately afterwards, I hear coming from the woods in between my house and my neighbor's house here. Now, it was definitively two rocks being clacked together. Anybody that's threw a rock on rock knows what a rock sounds like, and it was definitely two rocks clanging together. And it stopped me in my tracks. And when it stopped me, I looked across the way here, and I see it, a bipedal figure with hair, real tall, real broad shoulders, standing in between mine and my neighbor's house in the silhouette of the front porch light. And, you know, if I looked anywhere else that night, you couldn't see nothing. But with that light being there, it was a perfect silhouette of a bipedal figure, and it had the weirdest, you know, it was just moving back and forth and around. You know, almost like a chimpanzee does when it right before it takes flight into a tree. And I shook it off. I shook it off that night. You know, 1:30 in the morning. It's late, and this thing blocked out half of my neighbor's house here. You know, I thought maybe I've been up too long. It's time to go to bed. So I go to bed, and the next night, my wife tells me to take the trash out. This was the following night. And I come out here, my light kicks on, and here's this pathway, or excuse me, footsteps in my front yard in a straight line going from this tree to my front window. Now, I get a tape measure out immediately afterwards, and I go out, and I picked up 7 feet from heel to toe on each stride, which was 8 steps coming off the road. 8 steps from that tree to the front of my house. I played soccer my whole life. I can jump. I play basketball. I couldn't make that jump. 21 jumps I made, you know, trying to even get close to mimicking the footsteps of whatever walked up to my front door, which I know is a Bigfoot. You know, just there's nothing else it could be. And, you know, I just wanted to get my story out and say to people that, you know, if you do see something like this, you know, don't shake it off. Look into it a little bit more, because these animals are real. And, you know, I'll take that to my grave.
Kentucky okay. Research Organization. Whoops, you could have left that trailer going for Charlie. No, that's fine. Anyhow, join the, if you want to see a lot of clips, go check out BigfootResearch.org.
Yeah, Charlie does a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He puts a lot of work into it.
All right, let's do Tech Breakdown. I see Carlos is in the back room, so we'll bring Carlos on right after that. I'll introduce him, and we will bring him on. So let's do Tech Breakdown.
Here we go.
Technological breakdown.
All righty. So one thing we've never talked about, I've never talked about walkie-talkies. And I thought, well, let's bring it up. The reason I bring it up is I go out with teams quite often.
Mm-hmm.
And they never have walkie-talkies. And very often, you know, like one group will go off here or way ahead, and you just kind of, you know, it just becomes a pain in the butt to meet up again or to relay any incidents that's happened. But the reason I'm recommending these, because they work really good, and they're $30 for 4 of them.
It's cheap. $30.
$39 for 4 of them. But the special, what I like about these is they have this controllable little headset. You know, it's got the dual pin. It's got to be a dual pin ear piece. So now you can control the volume. You can actually hit the talk button with that. So you can put the damn unit, you know, clip it on your chest, and you can have hands-free communication.
Wow.
And these have, you know, lithium-ion batteries. They go, yeah, they're all pretty standard. You know, you can't really believe any of the range once you get in the woods, but they're plenty far. Usually groups aren't going to go miles and miles away from each other. They'll work really well. But the real key thing is that headset. And to be able to buy a whole set for $40, $10 a piece with a headset that matches, with batteries and chargers, a belt clip, and a little rubber ducky antenna, which are great because you can extend that. You can get bigger antennas.
Yeah, they just screw on.
Yeah, they're cheap
antennas.
too. Yeah,
super cheap.
Yep. So anyhow, that's why I wanted to talk about this. And this brand, maybe Jeff, if you want, you can put a link in later, but I believe it's pronounced Paxton.
Okay.
It's on Amazon. I'm not affiliated with this. I don't get any kickbacks, nothing. That's not why I do this. I do this to get people to think, it's just something I hadn't thought about. I don't have a set of walkie-talkies for our team or for myself that they can then distribute them out to people. This is a great bargain.
Yeah, really useful in the woods. And this should be obvious, but he doesn't need a cell signal. In areas where there's no cell signals, that's going to be your only communication.
Well,
so it's a safety issue.
Yeah, but Jeff, cell phones put out light. These have no light on them, right? So the little bit of red light that tells you it's on, you can just put a little piece of gaff tape over it.
Sure.
And they have a squelch button, 16 channels, and so they're going to work really well for you.
Cool.
All right. So what else here? I wanted to talk about an app real quick. And a lot of people don't know apps like this exist. Some do. Some people have been using them for years. But throw up photo 12. And this is the OnX Off-Road Trail Map app. And why it's really cool, it's so much better than just for the trails. It's going to tell you where all the public land is.
Oh.
Camping, research, that's where you're going to want to go researching. So it'll show you the boundaries of the public land that's, available for you to use for whatever you want.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be on private land.
Right.
And what's really good is you don't need to be in the middle of nowhere to do research. You heard that guy's story. Yeah, he's in a rural area, but I guarantee there's probably a convenience store 5 miles from him. So if you're in kind of a city or suburban environment, this app is really, really important.
Yeah. Well, just Monday, we were less than an hour out of the metro and we were in prime country.
Yeah. And so it's called OnX Off-Road Trail Map app. And I think it's free.
I've never used it.
When I downloaded mine, I really don't know. But it's nationwide and it'll show you all the public land and all the trails, even a lot of the hiking trails. And it'll show you specifically where you can camp.
Cool.
So it's very cool.
It's useful, yeah.
Yeah, very useful. And then I wanted to show a clip, video 3, and this is maybe just for fun, but this is stuff you can do with your thermal cam if you're bored.
Video.
Go ahead and play clip 3, but no sound, please.
Clip 3. Sorry, I'm looking for it.
Video. It's not called clip 3. It's video 3.
I'm looking for it here.
Or you probably don't have it then.
I don't have a video 3.
It was right under the. If you just go to the picture, it's right below that in the description in your show notes. Sorry, we'll do it. We'll deal with it next week. I will remember to put it next week's log.
Oh, here it is. Oh, I did have it. I'm sorry. I did have it. Everything's a little bit out of order here. Give me 1 second.
Yep. Video 3, no sound.
Oh, this one. Yeah. This is a good one.
Yeah. This is stuff you can do with your thermal cam when, no one's around. You can.
1 second here. You ready?
Yeah. Parental.
Little parental warning here a little bit.
Yeah. Parental discretion. I said no sound, Jeff.
Oh, I thought you said sound. I'm sorry.
No sound. Jeez. So you can see how well they work. That's why thermal cameras work out. They detect it's called evacidity. And it just the slightest temperature difference it's going to show. And people do fart a lot. Sorry, they do. You don't ever do though, Jeff.
Once or twice.
Once or twice in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Anyhow, it's just humorous because I've seen it with my own eyes. So
yeah,
it's kind of funny. There you go. Lighten up, people. Lighten up. All right. Our guest.
Yes.
And Carlos, you're going to have to forgive me if I pronounce your name wrong. I'm not good with Spanish or Latin names. It's Jimenez. Carlos. Do you think that's how it's pronounced?
I don't even want to say.
You don't know. Huh?
We can just ask him in a second.
Well, we will.
Yeah.
And I should know this, but I'm not good at remembering last names. So anyhow, apparently Carlos, first off, is working on a cool project called the Chronicles of Carlos. So we'll get that out of the way. And that's going to be, I think he's posted some parts on YouTube. And there's more he's in post-production on. But his educational background is in the sciences. He earned a BA in anthropology at Pomona College under Dr. James McKenna, and he finished the master's PhD program. So I guess it's doctor, right? No.
He's shaking his head. No.
PhD program. Oh, that he started at Washington State University under Dr. Grover Krantz. Oh, I thought he graduated with that. Okay. An MA in anthropology. So he's got a master's in anthropology at the University of Wyoming under Dr. George Gill. It says my graduation project at Pomona, where I also founded the Cryptozoology Club and was a member of the International Society of Cryptozoology. And apparently they covered covered the existence of Bigfoot. And he had an unpublished thesis about Gigantopithecines, but he put Gigantopithecines. I don't know what that is. I guess there's a whole family of these things.
That'd be my guess. What that word means.
Gigantopithecus black.
He's nodding his head. Yep.
Yep. And I know there's a bunch of other ones. It says that he has worked as an anthropological, biological, archaeological, cultural, and linguistic teaching on his Chronicles of Carlos YouTube pages. Carlos investigates, creates, and shares educational content, extraordinary Bigfoot encounters, and other mysteries. So I'm going to stop there. Bring Carlos on. I'm excited to talk to him. It's been a while.
Okay. And welcome, Carlos.
Yay. There he is.
Hello. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Good
to see you again, Jeff. And
Yeah. It's been a while. We used to talk a lot, and then we just kind of quit there. I don't know what the hell.
And crazy. A lot of new stuff going on since we last spoke. Still working on trying to edit this docu-series, but we're getting close now to the end. Started a new career.
It's looking good too.
Thank you. Moved on from education, and I'm now working as a scientist in the agricultural department here in Del Norte County. So I'm an agricultural biologist and a standards inspector. I was out in the gas station all day today.
So I have a question. What came first, your interest in Bigfoot or your experience when you were young?
My experience, I mean, I didn't know what it was that I had an encounter with that first time. So, I mean, I had an interest in nature. I mean, we were country kids, back in the 70s. We grew up near a swamp and woods and, Appalachian foothills. So we were outdoors, plus it was the whole 70s culture, the Gen Xers like myself with the bikes. And how do you know where the kids are? Just look for the bikes either at the wood line or in somebody's yard.
Well, you were living the Stranger Things back then.
It literally, when that show came out, I was like, oh my God. I literally thought of every single, a handful of my neighborhood friends and kids I went to elementary school with. Hopefully someone ever watching tonight. I retouched base last summer with many of the kids I went to elementary school with, and kind of gave them an update on what I was up to and what I've been into, and kind of checked in with them and said, hey, any of you guys ever hear anything, see anything weird, in our old stomping grounds? And some of them, none of them had any encounters, and like the class A that I had at the time, but many of them had that. There's a section where I had that encounter. There were several that told me that they got that feeling that they were being watched there, and like that they should leave. So I've at least gotten confirmation from a couple of my old, as you said, Stranger Things friends from back in the day.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's hear. Well, I want to hear this story.
Oh.
I know you told it to me a long, long time ago. I remember nothing of it, like literally nothing, but I know it was good. What happened when you were young?
When, we were kids. So, we used to play at each other's houses, go out in the woods and play. So I had a friend that lived up on this dirt road up above where we lived. We lived down on a road called 285 in the village of Custards in Crawford County, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And, from the time, pretty much for me, it was second grade through sixth grade. And so my childhood friends all lived in that area. And when I was up playing at a buddy's house, I'm pretty sure we were probably playing Atari, because he had an Atari and I didn't. So we were up there playing Atari, and it was getting late. And my best memory of when it was time of year wise was summer, because it was well after dark. And, I remember his mom basically shooing me out, saying either you're spending the night or it's time for you to get going. And so, probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night, but it was dark out, full darkness when I left, and had one of those us kids back then. We had the Star Wars movie came out. So there were these blasters, and I had one of the little blaster toys, and with the C batteries. And when you pull the trigger, this little thing spun the barrel and it made a noise like, anyways, I was walking down the road, and his dirt road was kind of canopied, like, the trees kind of grew up over the top of you. And I was heading down the road home, and, off to my right, I had the sense that there was something there. And just about the time I got the sense that something was there, I noticed two things. One, and this is the only time in my life that I've ever had the smell. And there was a smell that I just can't even begin. I mean, I can begin to describe at this point because I've tried to so many times, and it's that rotted meat.
Yeah, the rotted meat.
That dog, really heavy, wet dog. And my memory, and I've heard other people describe it, but my memory was like just a little sulfur, like I don't know, like an egg or a match strike, but it was like a combination of those things. But the strongest was the rotten, wet dog kind of smell. And as I hit that, I mean, it was like a wall. Like I stopped dead in my tracks. But right as that was happening in my mind simultaneously with this feeling like I'm being watched, and something doesn't want me here right now. And that feeling, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever had that kind of that feeling of dread or terror. I don't know if it was terror or dread. I was a kid. I mean, I was probably 9 years old. This was in 1979, 1980. Again, which year at this point? So long ago. But that feeling, and then there was silence, coupled with silence, like in a silence in that way that those that have had an encounter, many of them, I've heard it many times now since, have described it the same way I tried to put it into words, which is like you're in a dome, like there's a dome of silence. It's not like when a predator walks in and the bugs stop for a little bit and they start up again. It was like you couldn't hear anything, or like you're underwater, or there was something going on. It's at this point, I'm wondering, was there something going on with my hearing? Was something affecting my hearing? Because it just sounded eerily silent suddenly. And it wasn't silent as I was walking down the hill. I could hear the stones kicking. There were some ponds to my left, and those ponds had a lot of frogs. You could hear the frogs, the cricket. We had a lot of crickets. There was a dairy farmer had fields to my left. And so those fields, had lots of bugs and summer insects, lots of noise. To my right, though, there's trees until you got to the cow pasture. And even the cow pasture had sporadic trees in it. But to the right, though, was just forest. And right, like maybe 10 feet off of the dirt road, it dropped down to this little creek that ran down into the swamp down by where I lived. And at the time, I mean, I always thought it was like 100, 300 foot deep ravine down to that creek. It was probably maybe 100 feet, 150 feet down. So drop in elevation to that creek. So real steep.
It's a steep drop
with trees right there. And the other side was the same way. So it was this creek, you know, was eroding pretty much straight down in my childhood. I've now since gone back a few years ago, and that whole basin has been eroded out, 40 years of erosion. It didn't look the same to me at all when I went back to show Renee, my wife here. So we went, and when we went back, it looked completely different. But in this moment, when this happened, it was still this steep ravine. And to my right, all this is happening. I couldn't tell you how much time passed. It felt instantaneously. I smelled this, I sensed this, and I felt frozen for some amount of time, probably just seconds. But after some time, I didn't know what to do. And my instinct was, my brain starting to try to figure out what is this that's off. It just felt like there was something off to my right. I hadn't heard anything, hadn't seen anything. I just smelled something and felt like something was there. And again, I don't know how to describe that as a scientist, that feeling of being watched, out of your peripheral vision. But I had that feeling, that sixth sense that something is looking at me and doesn't want me here. And my instinct, thinking, I didn't know there was big feet. I didn't know anything about that at the time, and just something I'd never even heard of. Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, this has got to be a black bear or something. And so I had my toy gun and I just pulled the trigger on it. Like, I don't know if it was instinct, but it was my conscious or unconsciously. I pulled that trigger and this gun starts going. Wee, 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 wee. And that's when suddenly 5 to 10 feet to my right, it just sounded like, I don't know, I always say like a truck or like a Caterpillar, big rig just went down the side of that steep ravine, just crack, snap, trees. It sounded like trees were falling. It sounded like branches were breaking, but it initiated not far from me to my right. Like, again, couldn't see anything. It was pitch black in there. Now there was starlight enough. I wasn't walking with a flashlight or anything. So I could see, I could see out in front of me. I could see, but I couldn't see what was off there in the darkness, and it dropped instantly anyways. So after hearing this crack, 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 crash, and then in my brain, I'm going, oh, it was a bear, and I scared it, and it fell down the hill. That's what my, kid brain was saying. Okay. And just maybe 10 yards in front of me, there was a pathway that went down to the right. Down that we used to take, the kids, we would take that down because we would walk that creek, and at the top there was a little waterfall that came from a culvert that ran under Interstate 79, which is the big north to south interstate in my part of the state where I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, runs from Erie down to Pittsburgh. But that we would swim in a little waterfall that came out of a culvert just under that freeway, and then that waterfall turned into this creek. So we had a pathway to get down there. So I stepped forward to that pathway and looked down, and there was enough ambient skylight that I saw this thing step out. And I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, I was already in this, worked up state, but I saw very clearly what it was in silhouette. And it was very dark, but this thing was big. To a kid, I couldn't give you an honest measurement, but I definitely would think from the biggest people I knew, which were over 6 feet tall, this thing was 7.5 feet tall. Yes. I mean, I didn't have anything to measure it by, and I was just a kid. It wasn't something I was doing. Now, obviously, there's lots of things I would have done to follow up. But at that time, it looked 7.5, maybe bigger, but it was huge. And the thing is, a lot of people talk about the height, but the thing that really stuck with me, two things. One, it looked like, it was anthropomorphic. It had our kind of proportions and shapes, except, again, the arms seemed really long. Or the legs seemed really short to me as a kid. I couldn't quite tell. But the one thing that was clear, when it stepped out, the chest front to back was huge. And then it felt to me like it turned. I couldn't see a face. I could just see this little head and these shoulders. The thing that I remember the most was just these shoulders that came out straight out from there was no head and neck. To this day, because of that first sighting, I have a hard time when I look at other people's videos or images of something that's got a neck and a head, not instantly thinking, well, that's some kind of a person, because this thing, and now I know, it was probably the muscles. This thing just looked like if we just had the top of our head and our shoulders came out of our right above.
So you saw a little bit of a bump of a head.
Oh, I saw the bump of the head, and it came out where I could see the chest, and it seemed to get wider. So I think that it turned, but it literally just took 2 steps. There was barely a pause, and then it kept going. It took a step into the creek. I felt like it gave a little turn to look at me because of, again, the way that the chest changed into these huge, like wider even shoulders. And then as the arms moved, it took another step, and I could see the 2 arms, could see the 2 legs, and this thing walked. And then I could hear it going up that steep incline on the other side. It just sounded like, feet and hands. It sounded to me like it was like, I don't say it was on all fours, but it was, because it was pretty vertical. I think that it was like grabbing for, handholds and using footholds, but I didn't hear the whole ascent and move on. I heard enough. And at that point I knew it wasn't coming for me. And so I took off. Running. I remember the feeling that I was just on the tips of my big toes going down the rest of that dirt road. And I've wanted to go back and measure this distance, but I believe it's close to a mile and a quarter from my friend's house, that walk, and then down this other cement road. And then it hit that 285, just a state, 55 mile an hour highway where I ran back to my place. Now this creek, the waterfall to the creek where I saw this thing cross, continued down through people's backyards and through this farm, went under then 285 and then popped up. And it was the border of our yard where we had a big floodlight, and the yard was cut back. And then again, over there was woods. And then there was woods all the way to the swamp behind us. And we were, I'd say, probably half a mile from the actual like swamp, if that. And so our yard was surrounded by woods and a road on one side. But that whole night I spent like peeking through under my curtains out to that wood line and watching for that thing. I don't think I know I didn't sleep that night because I stayed up till dawn. When I went back the next day, well, as soon as the sun started to come up, I knew that the dairy farmer was the one person that I might be able to, do something with, might be able to go with me to go and see what this thing did, and I remember going over there and being all worked up. He was in the middle of dairy work. It was 5 a.m, I'm sure, 6 a.m, maybe. I didn't wear a watch. I have no idea, but it was daylight was coming up in the summertime. And we started to walk up there, and I was like, no, get your gun. He says, oh, come on. He thought I don't know what he thought. I mean, I was a kid and I'd never gone over there that early in the morning, but he did walk with me, this farmer, and I'm not going to say any names. He's passed, but the farmer that lived, the dairy farm right across from us, he walked up there with me. We went up the creek though. We didn't go up the road. So we walked the creek because it's a shallow creek. It's not, you can walk in it in tennis shoes, and maybe sometimes if it's flooding, it'll be knee high, but we walked up there, and that's where he saw it. We could see the broken branches. Some of the trees were knocked over, and he could see, and I remember seeing the footprint. On one side, there was a heel and part of the bottom of the foot. And then across the other side, the gouge marks all the way up, and there were toes and a partial print on the other, the second step. But everything else was just, gouge marks, nothing that was definitive. But in the mud in that creek, I remember that was the first time I ever saw a footprint. And of course, this is the 70s, 79, 80. We didn't pour a cast or anything. But he said,
how old were you exactly?
I want to say I was 9 or 10. 9 or 10.
Because you were only 9. But most 9-year-olds are pretty aware of what's going on in the world. But because you're only 9, do you have any doubts? Do you look back and go, God, did I really see that? Are you sure of your experience?
It's easy to answer that now. But I remember, like, when I tried to think about what was I thinking about for the days and weeks after that, I'm pretty sure that even as a kid, it was probably on my mind. But at some point, I didn't even think about it anymore because nobody else talked about it. I didn't hear anybody else say anything about it in the neighborhood. Nobody else was worrying about it. So, the farmer promised me that I wouldn't have to worry about it anymore as long as I didn't talk about it. And I promised him I won't say anything. And I never saw it again. So being a young kid, and I trusted him, I didn't even tell my parents. I didn't tell my siblings, my best friends. Now, the interesting thing that I do remember, and again, so I don't remember when it left my mind or when I stopped worrying about it. But I definitely then had, I don't want to say nightmares, but I had a lot of weird Bigfoot dreams after that, which I don't even know if I've ever mentioned that before on a podcast, but I did. I had a lot of, especially in my teenage years, I had a lot of weird dreams. But in elementary school, I definitely started to get an interest though in those weekly readers where you could order books as kids. And I remember ordering, like, I was always, most of us were into the Guinness Book of World Records and stuff like that. But I remember there was a couple of books that were about like unusual things that aren't normal, because the only thing I knew for sure, that thing wasn't normal. I'd never heard or seen anything like it. I certainly was in the school library, and eventually I would see, pictures of this thing in a Time Life book or something. But yeah, so I definitely got into, UFOs and Loch Ness Monster. And
yeah.
I remember seeing it on In Search Of.
Well, did you see the Patterson-Gimlin footage before your sighting?
I believe that the first time I ever saw that was when I saw that In Search Of episode sometime after.
Oh, geez.
And I think that it came out. Oh, I was like, okay. Well, the real time where what I remember going, oh my God, was when I was a sophomore at Pomona, and I was pre-med, and I took an anthropology class because we had breadth of study requirements, and Dr. James McKenna was teaching the Intro to Physical Anthropology class. And pretty early in that class, I want to say maybe the third week, he's talking about Gigantopithecus, and he throws up a frame from the Patterson-Gimlin film. And I about jumped out of my skin because, again, I hadn't talked about it. No one had talked about it. So in my college years, I started then telling my story from that first encounter. And it actually kind of redirected my life. I switched out of pre-med. I moved into anthropology. I ended up getting my undergraduate in anthropology under Dr. McKenna. And his specialty wasn't this. He taught that class. His specialty was sudden infant death syndrome. But he was all behind me.
Let me stop you there, Carlos.
Mm-hmm.
Did you tell other, as you grew, did you talk more about it, or did you still keep this to yourself?
As soon as that class happened, I started to try to reach out to people I used to know, and I had found out that the farmer had passed. So I felt like, okay, now I can talk about it. Because again, I don't know, I was raised Catholic, so I was always believed in, going to confession and you shouldn't tell a lie. And so I promised him, I gave my word, and that to go back on that would be to lie to him. And so at any rate, at that point, any of my college friends that are listening want to jump into the chat can tell you, obviously I started a club there and everything else, but I started to really get into it when that professor told me I could do my undergraduate project basically a thesis on that.
Yeah.
I jumped at the opportunity. I flew up to Wazoo. I interviewed Dr. Krantz. His book had just come out, Big Footprints. And I got a couple of videotapes of that somewhere where I'm hoping to produce and turn into something eventually. They're in their storage unit. But yeah, I interviewed him right after his book came out.
So did you relay your experience to Dr. Krantz?
Oh yeah. And
what did
then
he say? Do you remember what he said?
I really don't remember. I'm sure it was part of my introduction to fly up there to do that interview for my undergrad project that would have been 1993 or 1994 when I talked to him. But after that interview with him, and as I was wrapping up my project, they offered me a full ride to do a master's PhD program there, and they made me his TA. So I got accepted to do a master's PhD, and I did all but the dissertation there. Yeah. And then life happened, and I ended up moving away, and he ended up passing away, Dr. Krantz, while I was working on that thesis. But in that time, I got to present a draft of that thesis at Sasquatch Days up in British Columbia, Harrison Hot Springs in 1996, and met a lot of the characters that you guys know, Danny Perez, some of the older guys. The Four Horsemen, a couple of them were there. Krantz did not go, but he was my advisor for my master's PhD program. And most of the other faculty there was on board. Dr. Barry Hewlett in particular, because of my interest in cryptozoology, he ended up getting me in grad school to go to Africa and look for the Mokele Mbembe. And so he helped me acquire funding for that and grant money to go, and ended up doing like an NIH funded study of 9-month-old infant behavior of this village in the rainforest in the Congo and the pygmies. And it was the pygmies then that were going to try to take me into the Lake Tele region and they were telling me stories, and we had audio recordings of all that on cassette tape that I don't know what has happened to them, but those were, if I could have one thing back that I lost over the years, it'd be those audio recordings, because I had recordings of the pygmies singing that was just amazing. And in their interviews, they would speak in Aka. I had a French Aka speaker who would translate it into French. And then one of my classmates, Donald Shannon, he was French native. And so he could then speak it to me in English. So we were going 3-way translation, asking about, have you seen this animal before? Oh yes, that's the lowland gorilla. Have you seen this animal before? Oh yes, that's the okapi. Have you seen this animal before? No. And it was like, a black bear. Have you seen this animal before? And it's the sauropod dinosaur. Yes, Mokele Mbembe. So I got similar results to some of the, other people that had done research up there at the University of Chicago.
A lot of people don't know, but there are many sightings of a non-gorilla Bigfoot type creature in Africa and South Africa, especially. And we're going to have a gentleman. Pardon?
You talking about the Mbili?
No. I'm talking about a regular upright type, just Bigfoot creature in Africa. And I'm going to bring a gentleman on who's published a book with us that has that account. I believe it's called The Secret Elephants. He discovered these very small herd of thought to be extinct elephants in Africa, and then wrote a book about it. But he, I don't know why I can't think of his name right now. I've talked to him numerous times, but I'm going to get him on. It's a real problem with the time zone. We're probably going to have to do a pre-record, but he has seen these creatures with witnesses.
Wow.
And that's so amazing,
I wish if I could go back and do it again, I would have had a picture of a Bigfoot and asked if they'd ever seen anything like that, but it wasn't, I didn't think of it at the time.
Well, okay. Well, I want to get into something, probably kind of a weird question, but you're a scientist and you're a knower, correct? I mean, these things are real.
Well, because
you still have some doubts.
No, I mean, and again, I just didn't know what I'd seen. And then, like I said, I got that real hard confirmation as I started to see some TV shows. I eventually went to the movies and saw that Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot.
But are you, I'm just trying to get, are you
I'm a knower
or a believer?
I know these, where the hard question for me is still the question of what are they?
What are they? Okay.
Because there was a time, if you asked me in my college years, I was full on, a student of Krantz's. And so I was in his camp. I mean, he was my advisor.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to not.
Gareth Patterson. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, David. It's Garrett Patterson. I don't know why I couldn't think of his name, but he published a book. And I really recommend it. It's, if you go to Hanger One Publishing, it's called The Secret Elephants. And in there is the account of these creatures.
Awesome.
And he's a biologist. I mean, he's not just some guy, he knows wildlife. He also worked, what were the people that used to raise the lions, the orphan lions? They were quite famous. The Born Free people.
Oh gosh, I
can't think of their names. I don't know why. I'm having a bad time with names today. But
the lion was Elsa. I remember that.
Yeah, but he actually took over the work with those lions after they passed. So he's definitely a wildlife expert. And I know he's just really, it's tough to coordinate something when you live on the other side of the world. But we'll do a pre-record, and his stories are literally gripping. So even in Africa, they've got, they have sightings. People just don't talk about it. But how do you deal with the fact you're a scientist, Carlos? And these things need to be studied. They're not something you just laugh at, right? You don't blow it off. At least they need to be studied. I would go crazy. I would be like hitting I don't know what I would do. Because I can't do that because I'm just a yo-yo and I have no power. But you
do though. I mean, you've produced Monster Quest again. I mean, in that time of my life where I was just realizing that I was a knower. I mean, your show came out, and several, became a little bit more of Americana. In the beginning, it was a little bit less Americana. Now it's, we've got TV commercials and jerky and pizzas that have been sold. I mean, my students, my swimmers, made me a mug with all their faces on Bigfoot bodies. We're living in a different time than back then. So for me, it's not, especially because, I mean, maybe it's because I'm in California. I don't know, but I've got, people early in my career, other than academic career, it wasn't something I talked about with people in my employment. Even when I started social media, I tried to create a separate social media page just for the Bigfoot, all the different social medias. I started Bigfoot pages for those and I tried to not have them be a part of my personal persona, even though it is a part of who I am. But that's become less of an issue, as I'm now in my fifth decade of life. It's not the stigma that it once was.
No, I realize that, but there's no funding. There's no formal study. There's no anything. We have funding, apparently. I've been hearing all the funding, the things we've been funding.
Mm-hmm.
Square dancing in Afghanistan, 30 million or whatever. Really? We can't put a couple of mil into the study of Bigfoots in the U.S.?
I wonder if Dr. Meldrum or any of the others have tried. I don't know. I mean, again, when I was when I was at Wazoo, that wasn't something that, I was allowed to study it. I was allowed to, and I was supported internally in the academic world, but not like in a, hey, let's see if we can get some grant money to do this. Again, although interestingly enough, that grant money for me to look for the Mokele and Mbembe did come in, but that came from Oxford Swan Fund in England, not from the United States.
Yeah.
So it was less of a stigma even in the 90s abroad in other countries than it was, here for academics, especially for academics in science.
Right.
To this day, other than Dr. Jeff Meldrum and then Dr. Grover Krantz, you don't get a lot of people with, academic pedigrees doing this. That having been said, I'm so excited to be a part of Project Zoo Book, where I do get to meet regularly with.
Are you participating on that on a pretty regular basis?
Yeah, as much as I can. I've been able to more now with my new schedule because for that a year ago I was having a little bit harder time. But yeah, I'm back trying.
Well, good. Yeah, and I've missed a bunch of one because Thursdays are my busiest day. It's so.
I know it's hard. But this next one, you should try to sneak in because from a few years ago they're going to be updating. So there's some cool stuff coming.
And some new people, I would imagine.
What I hope for is that the Zoo Book evolves into something. But I know, again, a lot of the people in there, it's exactly what you're talking about. They can't really come out and say what they're doing, what their interest is, because they've got jobs as, primatologists, as molecular
researchers.
And again, that could affect their grant funding and actual money. It was in the movie Friday. The line was, playing with my money is like playing with my emotions. You don't want to play with people's money. And so as much as people might be passionate, curious, interested, now for the knowers, I think that they find a way. I mean, that was my story is, as a knower from an early part of my life, I've been interested. Now, have I been out in the woods every weekend since I was 9? No, but then I had another encounter when I was in graduate school under Dr. Krantz, where he sent me out to investigate, which is one of the things that I did other than being his TA. We would get emails. He would get phone calls at the university. Email was pretty new, but he would get some emails. And then he'd give me a topo map and send me out. Go and see if you can find some evidence. Go and interview this person. And it was on one of those trips with a topo map down in the Blues Mountains when I had my second encounter. And that's when, I was like, okay, what's going on here? Like, why me? Anybody else goes out, or I could go out 100 times and never see this. Why in just a handful, dozens, but still, not 1,000 or 1,000,000 times. And it made me wonder, maybe people just aren't putting themselves out in these locations and just putting yourself in their habitat. I don't know. But I also know that there's a lot of hunters, a lot of fishermen, a lot of hikers, a lot of outdoorsmen that are my age, never seen anything and older than me. I've talked to 70-year-olds here and older, and they've never seen anything.
Yeah.
One of my favorite people in the docuseries that I'm doing, her name's Janice Wyatt. She's in her 90s, and I interviewed her, for the movie a couple years ago. She used to work for the Forest Service. So it was awesome for me to hear, somebody who did have multiple encounters, who was out in the woods all the time. But that's not everybody. And I don't have an idea why. I know that on a lot of these podcasts and, even on some of my own posts, people like myself get trolled. Well, how can you see it more than one time, when I haven't even seen it one time and I've been in the woods? I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
Of course. Greg mentioned that somebody in British Columbia got funding recently. Could you expound on that a little bit, Greg? It would be nice. Is that government funding or private funding? Anyhow, but just to explain what Project Zoobook is.
By the way, guys, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the live chat. I'm just seeing every once in a while something pop up on the screen here.
Yeah,
but I'm not seeing
we're picking out people, but if you go up to the comments, it should be in the far upper right corner. You can turn that on and click it. Just click it, and I'll keep you apprised of any questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see that option, but I'll go ahead and just continue to listen. Thank you, Greg.
Yep. So, Zoobook is a bunch of people like Carlos who have academic degrees and all different disciplines. I mean, there's marine biologists even in there, but they're academics, and they're in there. And there's a few researchers
Citizen
that are
scientists.
trusted, yes, to interact with the scientist. And so it's quite interesting how some of the scientists got in there. A lot of them had some kind of an experience. That's why they're there. But it's secret. It's anonymous. Obviously, Carlos is
I'm outing myself.
out in the open.
I work for a great employer
Yep.
and
He doesn't
great
care.
coworkers. So, they all know my story. Some of them are probably watching right now.
Yep.
And again, it doesn't affect my professionalism. I hold my licenses, I've got my degree. I've got, I'm qualified to do my work. Having seen a Bigfoot doesn't disqualify me from doing my job, day to day. And I'm not
Right.
looking for a Bigfoot day to day in my job. So it's just a hobby for me at this point in my life.
Well, let's get into some craziness. You've told me some personal stories. You were working with a gentleman up in Northern California, as I remember, that had quite a few interesting stories. I don't know if there's some things you want to pass on. I know you've been filming up there. Are you kind of
I sent you like the first part of the docuseries. That might be a good segue into answering this question. If you can put that up.
I've got to ask because it's really tough now because of music licensing.
Mhm.
Is it licensed through you? Because they'll probably still shut me down.
There's no music. I'm giving you just my audio.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm just video and
okay.
audio. We haven't added any music to it yet.
But
And
how long?
the music that will be added to it is
Great.
made locally by a local artist.
How long is it, Carlos?
A minute.
Oh,
It's a minute.
perfect. Let's play it right now.
I am downloading. Give me a minute to get it ready
okay.
here.
All right.
All right. So while
Whenever
he's
you're ready.
I
downloading,
just saw the email, so give me a
repeat
second
your
here.
question one more time.
Well, go ahead and tell me one story from that Northern California guy. I don't really want to get into his background, and I'll leave that up to you and your doc. I don't want to give away the whole thing. But tell us one story that guy passed on, and then did you have any experiences while you were there?
I'll give you the back end. Yes, I've since I've been up here in the 3 years that I've been here, I had my first daytime sighting in this area, and a nighttime sighting that was terrifying with a corroborating witness who wishes to remain unnamed. But yeah, no, he's had 20 plus years now. I've personally not had anything. The last 2 years I've been, learning this new job and working on the movie. I've not been out adding any new content yet. As soon as this film's done, I plan on getting back to that. But in the last 2 years, he has you can almost set it to a cycle. It seems like in the fall, come August, September, and sometimes into October, there's activity on his property or near his property. And then same thing in February, March, once again, there's activity. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't come around any other time, but it seems like they come through the area and I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't know any more than that. But I am keeping track of when we're hearing them, when we're finding footprints, when things are happening that we can't attribute to people or bear or any other kind of activity. But yeah, in the last couple of years, he's had a couple incidents. But to your question, man, there's the 3-part docuseries. He tells a lot of them, but we had to edit even more out. So let me try to think of one. I'll share one that's from the docuseries. So he had this melon patch with these skip loader tires, I think 6 of them, with melons growing out of it, and he had it surrounded in this tall fencing,
Okay.
He had staked down, and something went in and undid the fencing, walked into this patch, and again, we have plenty of black bear and other animals that would maybe do this, but this thing opened up his fencing all the way up.
I want to interrupt you only because somebody's asking. This is Northern California, correct?
This is in Del Norte County, yeah.
Okay,
Del Norte County, just above the town. If you look on a map, just in the hillsides around the town of Gasquet, California, Gasquet, which reminds me, yes, you did a good job with your Spanish earlier. Jimenez is one way you could say Jimenez. I either way is perfectly fine.
Good. All right, keep going.
So yeah, so up there, this thing had opened up the fencing around it, gone in, sat down on one of the tires, leaving literally a butt impression in the vines that were smushed down and in the tire, and had eaten, most of his melons that he had grown. I think it was cantaloupes and muskmelons. But what was weird about it was, again, if a bear had done that, it wouldn't have sat on its, probably wouldn't have, it might have sat on its rump, but this thing left rump impression. But the bigger important piece was a bear would just eat the whole thing, rind and all. Whatever ate these were in a line 15 feet long, was opening the melons, because there was the last melon that was left had like either a thumb or a fingerprint with a nail mark in the rind where it had been like sticking its fingers in, twisting. It had eaten the insides out and then stacked them on top of each other in a line 15 feet long.
That's cool.
That's not a bear.
Don't do that.
Bear wouldn't do that. No way.
If he would have just had a picture from a movie, but that happened back in the 80s. So I of the many stories like that and better, even some.
Well, this guy's been living alone up there, correct?
Yeah. Well, his son grew up in the house with him. He had been married, and so there was a son and a wife. And I'm not going to tell stories that aren't in the movie, but I know that from talking with him, he had. I guess these were things that didn't make it into the film because his son did not want to be in it. But I know that during one of his son's birthday parties, there was people up there and there was screaming coming from the woods. One of them was going off and howling and he'd probably either doing the Ohio howl or a scream, and everybody heard it. And he did get a track cast after that, which unfortunately was lost when his shed collapsed and destroyed that cast. But currently, and for the period of time that I've known him, and majority of the time he's been up there, his son's now grown, doesn't live with him. And so, he mostly just lives alone, and has a girlfriend that comes and stays with him on the weekends.
Do you want to tell the gun story? There was a weird story.
I want to save I want to save the title story.
That's fine.
That's the one I want to save only because it's the title story. And yeah, that one's going to be part of the series, and I'll save that one. But
Jeff, are you ready with that clip?
Sure. Yep. You ready?
Yeah. Let's go ahead and play it.
My name is Carlos Jimenez. I had my first experience with Bigfoot when I was 9, and I've been studying the Bigfoot phenomenon on and off for 32 years since college. I decided to embark on my own adventure to gather stories and evidence and try to uncover this mystery. Join me on this 3-part docuseries as we travel to Del Norte County for our first expedition following the encounters of Kirk Stewart and gathering other stories from people in the area.
And so I was riding my bicycle and I heard something off to the side there, something walking through the brush.
Then I heard a footstep, twigs breaking.
And I see a little rock this big land on my purse. It stopped and landed on my purse.
We will be heading deep into the woods to a secluded area where only Kirk has been and where he had an encounter over 27 years ago. Let's see what we can uncover and find. This is the Chronicles of Carlos. Bigfoot buried my gun.
Well, that's interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to wrapping up the third episode, but it's
That's
just been me
interesting.
and the director, trying to work on the edits, and I didn't realize how much editing was going to be required.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I didn't know that was the title of the.
Yeah, that's why I won't tell the story, because it's the title.
Fine.
It's a title story, but there's so many. Each of the people that I have in the movie, I absolutely believe their encounters, and it was so hard to they say my director told me that the word is they killing the babies, the parts that we had to take out to keep it short enough. And then the first round of when we sent it out to the people that invested to help us fundraise for it, the first round came back. They wanted more of me, and it was too much. It was too much information, and that was when we had it down to about an hour and 40 minutes as a documentary. So we broke it up and reconfigured the whole thing as a docu-series, which meant that there were a lot of voiceovers that had to be done and a lot of things that needed to change to be added. That's why it's been taking a lot longer. But we're down to the third episode now. We picture locked the first two. We picture locked the second episode last night. And so I'm looking forward to now we've kind of got our rhythm back, and I'm looking forward to getting this third one wrapped up, getting the sound guys on it, and having you guys get a chance to hear these people's stories. Because this movie, I didn't want it to be about me. Again, the feedback was they wanted more of me. So the more of me, I took that to mean like they wanted more science. So I talk about things like cognitive dissonance and stuff like that. I bring in the reasons why we're not sure when we hear something. We're not sure when we see something. How our brains try to turn it into what we know,
right?
But our eyes can't agree with that. And so that struggle of what is it we're looking at. I also tried to add some things to it to make it a little different. I tried to come up with kind of a category system that I show. It's kind of a Bigfoot puzzle, so to speak, of like 10 characteristics. And the more of those that light up, when I highlight them with these stories, my point for the audience is they can see, oh, wow, okay, I can see why they didn't think that was a person. Oh, with that many lit up, oh, I can see why they didn't think that was a bear. And so I'm trying to quantitatively and qualitatively give people something to look at, as well as hear the stories that these people are sharing. That, again, I absolutely, the things that we've included, I fully believe everything they told me for the most part was accurate and not embellished. But the stuff that we've included, I'm very excited for everybody to get a chance to see.
So, okay, we have now, David Ellis has got, just him alone has got 8,500 recordings that have been vetted, that are not any other animal. I mean, that's a lot. And then there's now 10,000 sightings in GIS.
Mapped out,
man. Okay. But now,
can you share with the audience how they can, because saying it's one thing, but anybody who is actually taking the time to watch us right now or watch this later,
sure,
I'd love if you could share any kind of links to some of that, because that's the goal of my website and why I created the Chronicles of Carlos, why I'm doing the movie. I want people. You inspired me obviously with the Sasquatch, meets science.
Well, this is going to be in Legend Meets Science too. We're going to go into great detail on that. I will get with Jeff, and Jeff can put a link up. But my point is with all of the documentation and all of the I want to talk about the undocumentation. It's got to be a landslide. That's got to be a tiny tip of the iceberg of what's out there, and the people, the witnesses, the little stories, the lady, the rock lands on her purse, right? And I'm sure there's more to that story, but she's probably never told anybody publicly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to appear in your doc. That's it. That's the end of it. And thank God you found her. But how many would you guess are out there that we don't know about in sightings? Just try to take a
population. You're asking for like a population?
No, just what do you think? No, I don't want to know.
Oh, no, I mean, if you take the iceberg theory, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. I mean, if those, and you got to remember the piece that you're not saying that I know you understand, but the audience, I want to make sure they understand. Okay, if it's 10,000 that, 10,000 where we've got the mapped locations that people were willing to come forward and talk about it, how many thousands were too afraid to say anything to anybody? Or told one person said, I don't want to, I want to stay anonymous, because the number of times I've been told stuff that they don't want me to repeat, who they are, what is way more than the actual number of people that are like, oh yeah, I'll be in your movie. I mean, I only ended up using Kirk, 4 people in the movie telling their stories over these three. So
you focused.
Yeah, I stayed very focused. But now since then, and here's the thing, I was putting ads in the newspaper. I was putting it out, blasting everywhere for people to give me stories, and I got hardly anything. And then after now, I've been working on the movie for a couple of years, done these podcasts. Now I'm getting lots of stories. I even got stories today at work, from people in the field that I was out talking to, which is one of the things I do love about my job. I get to interact with the public. So I meet these old loggers. I meet these old timers that, go out in the woods and go fishing and hunting and camping.
Carlos, I love your energy. I do.
Sorry.
Oh, I do. I love it. I love talking to you. You're just like so.
I worked a 9-hour day today. You might not.
No, you're just passionate, excited. You were just like the opposite of some boring researcher.
I love the topic, and I love the questions, because these are great questions for the people that are listening. Again, it doesn't matter if you've never seen one. It doesn't change somebody else having seen one.
Right.
Whether I've ever seen a Loch Ness monster, if somebody's actually seen that, who am I to say that they didn't see what they saw? Having myself, as you said, considering myself a knower, and now having seen these things and experienced them, maybe not visually, but in other ways since then.
Right.
Like it's exciting to me. It's like, it's so exciting that I know that these things are there.
Oh, I think everybody knows you're excited.
Yeah, that's great.
I love it.
Me too.
But how many? So, okay, the iceberg theory. So we have, let's just say we have 10,000 documented now between the BFRO and John Green and, all of these sources. And there's been a lot of hard work put into it in the last, let's say 20 years. But how many are out there? Just take a guess. Give me a.
I'd go out on a limb again, just using the basic iceberg pyramid type theory, and think that if this is the tip of the iceberg and we got 10,000 as our N equals, there's probably conservatively 100,000 people that have seen, heard, found footprints, found hair, had a chicken, plucked in their yard and walked away with, just, all the weird things that,
the plucked chicken.
There's some weird, owls can do it, but not the way these things do. And it's so weird when they do. And there have been some plucked chicken stories up here that aren't in my movie, but actually I think I got one of them on my YouTube.
I laugh about that because I used to get teased because one time we were in the studio late at night and there was a sponsor, and it was the chicken plucker. And the voiceover wasn't in the thing. It was missing. So the guys in the studio made me do the voiceover for the chicken plucker commercial, and I haven't lived it down. I still get teased about it. So anyhow, when you mentioned that, it just sorry.
No, there's just all the high strangeness that surrounds these things. That's again outside of my scientific purview, where I don't have an answer, which is one of the main reasons why my view of what these things could be, either in the fossil record or in the current moment. What are these things? Where are they going? What's their purpose? Do they have some kind of society? Do they have laws? How is it that they know to stay away from us? There has to be.
Okay. Hold on. I want to write some of these damn things down. Jeez, I love your questions. So let's do it. Let's do this. Let's go ahead. I want you to start over. Just go a little slower so we can enjoy it more. You obviously have a million questions. Let's go. Go, Carlos.
Well, I mean, I'll go, but I'll take you back to my times with Dr. Krantz. That's when I first felt Dr. McKenna. I had some questions for him, but that wasn't his forte. When I first met Dr. Krantz, for me, it was like meeting a rock star, some movie star. And there I was, sitting in his office. And then it became my life for 2 years. I was his TA. So I was in his office all the time. And I loved just saying, well, why don't we do this? What if we got a busload of students and had cardboard cutouts of Bigfoot, 10 foot tall, 8 foot tall, 7 foot tall, and put them out at the edge of a wood line, and then drove by and then asked people, how tall was that, from this distance? And then let's try that with different. I was always trying to think of ways to scientifically quantify people's stories. Like the one big one that I remember coming up with that was on the ethical borderline. I was like, what if we, to find a body, because that was of course his big goal. He believed in, harvesting one if that would, prove that they exist so that we could protect the rest. The one thing that I came up with is that what if we could get tranquilizers and give them like a really bad cold or like the flu, so that once the bear was tranquilized, in the tranquilizer would leave some kind of a tracking device on it. We would either, put a collar, at the time was my idea, or some, clip the ear, give it some way to track it. And then as it's getting sick, follow it and see where they go, and see if we can map where do bears go when they think they're going to die. And I thought that might be the place then where we could do some sample digging to try to find bones, because again, one of the big arguments was, well, why don't we find more Bigfoot bones? Well, how many people have found bear bones in the wild?
Not many.
And so I thought if we could start.
I remember asking Scott Walter that question as one of my arguments when he was over here from History Channel doing a show. And he goes, well, I found a bear skeleton. Like,
well, and again, if you shot one with an arrow with a gun,
yeah,
but a naturally dying bear. So that my thought was, well, what if we got like 10 or 20 bears sick, and we're able to track them to see if there's any kind of cause and effect? Do they go to a certain place, like a certain geographic kind of a place, like geologically? Is it like within 10 feet of a water source? Do they go into a cave? Do they get under a log? Just so we could maybe get like, some data, and then go do some digging, dig down a couple of feet. Do we find any bones and test some plots? That was one of my, I had ideas like that all the time.
They're cool research questions, but I want to get back to the questions you want to know about Bigfoot.
The big questions.
Go ahead. Yeah. Just go ahead and give me the laundry list. Give everybody.
The biggest question for me is, there's a lot, so I'll try to go slow.
Just go ahead and get the brain diarrhea going.
I'm a little caffeined up now.
Good.
Like I said, I had a long day, so I'm probably talking a little fast.
No, go.
The questions I have are things about, okay, so I've seen them now. I start thinking about their societies. I start thinking about their behavior. And I do it on kind of two levels. Well, three maybe, but two particularly from a scientific point of view. Primate, based on how they look and most of their activity and their actions, is very primate-like to me. Right. And then there's the human. So pan, gorilla. So our anthropoids, the people, the us and our ancestors directly. And then there's the next layer out's our cousins, the great apes. So I try to think about it in terms of if this thing is a great ape, and or if this thing was us. And then my third category is into the woo, which is this something else? But I try to keep it to the two earthly scientific things that we know more about, because I can't get into the realm of what I know we don't know. But in those two realms, then I start looking at the fossil record and, how could things evolve? Could things evolve larger? Could things evolve, in different ways? And so again, under Dr. Krantz, I was thinking, these Gigantopithecines make sense. This is how they could have migrated over the Bering Land Bridge. And then they could have ended up in all these places where people are seeing them around the world, during different glacial periods. These things could have been moving based on when those fossils were dated. And then I started having my own other, encounters as an adult with these things. And I'm like, man, that doesn't act. Why is this doing this? Apes don't do this. No apes that I know, not even chimps, do this that I'm aware of. And again, that's why I'm excited to be in Project Zoo Book and hear like primatologists and other people that work with these closest cousins of ours and what they encounter and what they know, because other than reading books, I like those firsthand personal experiences. So for me, I don't have those. I wasn't a primatologist, but that was my interest in physical anthropology, was us and our closest relatives and our ancestral tree. So now I'm in those questions of, well, is it some distant like family tree of Homo sapiens? Is it related to Neanderthals? Is it related to going back? Is it a spur off of Australopithecines? Is it one of the robust Australopithecines that continue to evolve? I don't know, but these are questions that I go through as I've had my encounters, as I see other people's encounters, as I hear the similarities. And then there's just enough differences though that make me wonder, is there more than one thing out there that's, are there just Bigfoot type things? Are there other things out there based on some of the other things that people report seeing and, finding? I mean, the three-toed tracks, we were talking about these today at work, because while I was out in the field today, local community member said, hey, when I was up in that mountain, I encountered these feet that my whole foot would fit in. I couldn't even jump to the next track. And they had 3 toes. And I was like, whoo. He says, it was some kind of biggest thing I've ever seen, but it had 3 toes. And I was like, man, I hadn't heard of any 3-toed stories in this part of the country. In the southern part of the country, I saw a cast down in Fort Apache, down in northeastern Arizona, just a few years ago. But I've never personally seen anything with 3 toes. That having been said, one of the things in my series are some pictures that Kirk Stewart got on his property that left 3 digits. But I just thought it was 3 of the 4 or 5 digits and that the rest didn't take. But now I'm not entirely convinced that whatever that print isn't of something with 3 fingers.
Is it possible that Bigfoots have lost toes to frostbite, infections, skin punctures that got infected?
I mean, certainly that would be possible. I think that if that had happened, though, that where the toes are aligned with the front ball of the foot would show wider, where the toes that are missing would have continued on out of. But it seems that the tracks that I've seen with these 3 toes, the tracks aren't wider, and then the 3 toes are where 3 of the 5 toes would be. These look like these things would have 3 toes, and I've not. Again, when I say I've seen images, I've held casts. I've not run across them myself in the woods, but I've seen enough of this to make me wonder. Well, just because I found that inbreeding, it would be a possibility. I mean, of course, there's the famous Mossberg trackway from, was that Washington State? Somewhere up north from some time back. One of the 4 horsemen was the researcher on it. I know John Green wrote about it. But in Dr. Krantz, of course, he reconstructed those footprints to show what the bone structure would look like. And it definitely was a broken, healed foot because the trackway, that one foot was always funky and the bones had healed, but they were contorted. And so when he did that reconstruction from that trackway of those footprints, that's when I'm speaking now what I learned from Dr. Krantz, he determined that, this thing had broken its foot. But also he was able to determine that the ankle was set farther forward. Now he had mentioned the mid-tarsal break. I know that's Dr. Meldrum. That was one of his big things. But when he published his book, he told me that's one of the things. There was 2 things he didn't put in his book about the Bigfoot tracks because there were hoaxers, and I'm not going to say any names because some of those people are still out there, or their descendants are. And so I know that he definitely believed that there were certain people that were trying to make him look foolish. Renee DeHenen for sure did not love had no love lost for Dr. Krantz, but yeah, no. So
why would that be? You would think that DeHenen would have loved Krantz.
I'll just say that when I presented my paper at the Sasquatch Days in 1996, he got an honorary PhD. And it was, tongue in cheek. It was a joke because he had a disdain for people with academic degrees, Renee DeHenen. So, but I respected him otherwise. But him and Dr. Krantz had different views on things. Now I'm not saying DeHenen was he's not one of the people that Krantz thought was a hoaxer. They just had different takes on the subject.
Interesting.
Well, backing up a second, too, there's examples of human populations where hand and foot deformities are persistent due to limited gene pool. And obviously, Bigfoot's going to have an extremely limited gene pool. So if something's geographically isolated, that gene pool might, you're going to have some anomalies that are persistent. That's totally possible.
I'll rewind and say, yeah, I absolutely agree that, there could be genetic mutations in such a small gene pool, especially if there's a regional population and they don't do any kind of larger geographic breeding, then yes, those gene pools will change. And over time, if there's a mutation and there's any kind of inbreeding, even, over a couple of centuries, whatever that change is going to continue to show. But for it to be in the foot, that's kind of an important part of the anatomy.
Let's back up for 1 second. Okay. Inbreeding. Has there been any cases of humans of some of these families out east that live in the hills. There's been some families that have some inbreeding going on.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any cases of three-toed humans from inbreeding?
Yes. There's a population in Asia that
India,
they have lobster hands. They have just two digits on their hands and feet, and it's persistent in the entire
area. Yeah. And I would agree. I've seen documentaries on people with
absolutely.
Can't remember what it's called. Syndactyly.
Can't either.
Different kinds of
something dactyl. I can't remember.
Double 2 digits, and then like fusion of digits during the developmental phase.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a gene pool.
That absolutely exists in humans, 100%.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Now toes, I think it's the same. I think I haven't seen, the one thing I've seen is images of feet, but I haven't seen footprints or castings of people with that malady or that deformity, that genetic anomaly, if you will, that's not the 5-digit toes and hands. By the way, I wonder if you guys know this. Do you know what the dominant gene is for the number of fingers and toes that we have in humans, the current Homo sapiens? The dominant gene is actually for 6 digits. We're supposed to have 6 digits on our hands and feet, but somehow the recessive has been selected for over the years. Yeah,
that's fascinating.
I remember being
I didn't know that.
Shocked about that when I was teaching advanced AP biology, and we came across that. I was like, oh wow, I had no idea that we're actually exhibiting a recessive trait. Now it could be, I'm sure it's polygenic, but nonetheless, at least one of the genes that's been isolated for it is that we have selected for people with 5 fingers and 5 toes.
It's not, it's rare, but it's not crazy rare. It's just it's typical that it's corrected with surgery as an infant. So it's just, people just don't know about it or talk about it or think about it, but it's not that rare. You know what I mean? It definitely happens.
But I'm curious as to what percentage of the population currently still is born that way. But to your point, yes, that's the thing. Most of it's corrected at birth.
Mm-hmm.
The extra digit is just removed. Just same thing with people with vestigial organs. Most of the time, if you're born with a tail, they take care of that right after you're born, so that you don't grow up with it. Now, there are some adults though that, certainly, carnies and circus acts that probably, kept them for whatever reason. Maybe they weren't born in a hospital or wherever they could have it removed, and then they grew up with it. But yeah.
So the genetic problem with hair covering humans, is it hypotrichosis?
Hypotrichemia. I can't remember
something like it.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Exactly.
There are people that are born to look, hairy like a Bigfoot. They got hair all over their face.
Right.
And again, there's certain families or groups, populations where this is prevalent, and so they'll have kids that are born the same way, where the hair grows all the way up to the eyes.
But you wonder if that's just not some holdback genetic, that this is a branch of humans that has that, and maybe, God knows, they could have been banished thousands and thousands of years ago because of the way they looked, through discrimination.
Yeah.
Because obviously hair doesn't affect your intelligence at all, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know of any scientific evidence of hair, a correlation between the two. There might be a study that's been done somewhere for $30 million though.
Well, I did a show on Monster Quest on the family down in Mexico, and they were awesome. They were just some really amazing people. And one of the things I was after, do they have extra athletic abilities from that genetic difference? And we couldn't find any, but I was most interested in that.
What I often wonder about related to this is back in the 1800s when P.T. Barnum, and remember the JoJo, the dog-faced boy, and Jacko.
There's been a lot of people.
Were these people, or were these little infant Bigfoots?
Well, here's what I find interesting. There was a hair-covered samurai warrior that to this day they have his picture up in a lot of the Taekwondo studios. This goes back like 120 years ago. And he was like he was like the greatest, but he was completely covered in hair, his entire face. But he had this extra athletic prowess. You know, he was quicker. He could do things a little quicker. And I do find it interesting that the hair-covered family in Mexico, they're all athletes, and they all make their living off doing athletic, you know, the trapeze,
acrobats,
circus, and all that stuff. That takes a lot of, you know, muscles and bravery and, you know, a lot of things. But I always wondered about that, and that we end up getting a body someday and they do the testing and it's just 100% human. Like there's no difference, but it has this genetic variant of hypotrichosis or hypotrichosis. I think it's something like that. Maybe somebody can look it up. I just can't remember. It's been too many years since I've looked into that, but could you find that samurai guy, Jeff?
Sure.
Could you go online? Just take a look. It's amazing. And then there's the JoJo, the dog-faced boy that was quite famous.
Jacko, I think, was part of.
Well, Jacko was supposedly a creature caught in British Columbia, seen from a train.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped the train and they captured it.
Mm-hmm.
And they never, you know, was it a human? Was it, God knows, who knows, you know, a feral human?
But it had been laying on the tracks as the train came up, and then they cornered it against like a
cliff or something.
Yeah.
And you wonder if these stories are true, if they're fake.
That's exactly the problem, especially from that long ago.
But
a very fascinating story. But it was related to your, you know, hair covered, possibly, you know, hair covered person, more likely, or possibly a hair covered Bigfoot. Who knows? But the interesting piece back to you, I'm going to tie the two together now and segue your question about the genetics with things that I wonder about. I'm not entirely convinced, and you can tell in the final edits of the film I put together. I'm not entirely convinced that we just simply, without a sequence, without like, okay, eyewitness account, capture the hair, sequence it, without that full nucleotide sequence, I don't know which lab out there is going to be able to tell us that, oh yeah, this isn't human, it's a Bigfoot. All we were ever able to get back since the 90s is closely related to humans, closely related to the apes, but distinct from each. Nowadays, we when I watch these shows or when I see people's results, it's coming back human, so it must be contaminated. I disagree. I mean, if you look at the thing I wonder about is we are 99.7% DNA similarity with the bonobos.
Oh, I know.
Paniscus. You know, and then pan troglodytes is very high, close percentage of our DNA being identical. If we didn't have that 0.3% difference in markers, if you took a chimp hair and a human hair, they would come back as human if you didn't have that marker that fell within that 0.3%.
Yeah.
And so I have to believe that if these big feet are like us, which is why I'm now going from that ape camp more and more into some kind of hominid with these things, especially, I mean, it's not just the bipedal locomotion, but the molecular genetics, for me, there's a smoking gun there. Like how can, unless we get that sequence, how can you tell me that this hair that wasn't touched, you know, wasn't contaminated in any way is human? It's because you don't have that point whatever percent marker that falls outside of what our DNA is. Something that's in its DNA, but not in our DNA. Maybe it's something for the hair. Maybe it's something about its musculature, the neck musculature, a gene for that. Maybe it's just something with its digestive system. There's got to be a gene or a series of genes that's just a little different than the human, whatever those markers are that they use to determine.
But that could have been caused by a virus that one family got.
Yep. If it became part of the DNA and you know went on into the gametes, I don't know. I haven't followed any recent studies as to what viruses combined with DNA that gets passed on in gametes.
We're all formed, and all of our mutations are from viruses and bacterias and so on. We're shaped by that. But what bothers me is Bigfoot doesn't seem like any kind of stretch for its existence. I mean, if you shaved one, put him on the street, you'd go, oh, well, that guy's got some, you know, big guns. He's got some big muscles. We did a lot of really cool work with Patty and taking the hair off.
Yeah, I remember that work.
Back
I thought that was great, by the way.
If you go to the book Meet the Sasquatch, all of my work on doing that, it looked like basically a big native guy with nice high cheekbones or a native woman or whatever. But yeah, it looked just a little more primitive, but looked very a Native American Inuit kind of combination. It just doesn't seem like some weird monster.
Well, and that gets into this whole idea of regional differences, which again gets back to our genetic discussion. Populations in the South, populations back East have the more rounded head, have a more of a human look. Not to say that people out West and up North don't see those, but I know that the ones that I've seen with my own eyes, they don't have a head that if you shaved them down, I would think looked human. I mean, they got sagittal crests. They've got nuchal crests. I mean, you can see that conical kind of.
What if it's just bedhead?
I mean, you could have a point. I mean, you might be right. I don't know, but I just know what I've seen, and with my own eyes, they've had pointy. The back of their heads has been pointy.
Yeah,
the ones that I've seen, but I've also seen.
Well, we don't have a lot of really good images, so we have Patty.
Yes,
that's the best out in the open. We have the Freeman creature.
Mm-hmm.
We have some that I've stepped out into the open, into the sun, where I feel that the footage is pretty highly vetted. But we don't have a lot of info. It would be hilarious if their skull was normal and it was just bedhead. But they probably do have those heavier masticated muscles because
the jaw is huge.
Right. If you and I lived out there and had kids in generations, our kids would develop bigger, I would imagine, masticated skull muscles. And
I think it's, other than the jaws, the mouth. I mean, our mouths end right here. Our teeth row continues back. These things, their mouths keep going. Like the sides of their mouths seem like Pac-Man. They seem to go all the way out to the temporal mandibular joint. I mean, the skin, it's like they don't have cheeks like we do. Their cheeks, I don't know, they're farther back.
We have very high cheekbones, it seems like, from what I've gathered and what I've seen from all of the, like Sibylla Irwin, all of her drawings, all of who's the guy that did them for the Hoopa Project, and then
David Pleady's artist.
I can't think of his name. And then there was Pete Travers did a lot for the BFRO. And Pete was a great artist, is a great artist, and he did a lot of them. And you see that, those big cheekbones. It's just so interesting. What in the world are they? And I just think if they're so close to human, we're going to have a hard time identifying them. Don't you agree?
I do. And again, that's part of this genetics talk is, like I said, I've many times said this, if somebody out there, if we had our Tom Slick, if there was a modern day Tom Slick, or if there was a funding source from the government that could give us the money that it costs to sequence these things, then, and of course we can talk about, the attempt that was done in 2013 and published in the way that it was done. I'd like to see that same thing done today, but again, more scientifically rigorously,
right?
Where from where the chain of possession is controlled, and done by the same outfit, like on the spot collection, and then sequenced. And that's the 300. I don't know what it costs these days. $300 some thousand to run a full sequence on something.
I don't really know.
Last I looked into it, it was over $250,000.
It's still a lot of money, but it is coming down. The machines are getting better and better. Mm-hmm. I hope to God not that I don't run into that problem where I get to a certain point where they go, damn, it's got some really interesting, a couple of markers in it that one of them looks like it's divergent in some, whatever, orangutans or apes or bonobos. And then that's all the money we have, yet we have a good sample. That would be horrible. There was a question I wanted to pose to you. What the hell? My mind went blank. Do you feel that if we do get a full sequence, okay, and we do find there's a couple of little interesting things, nothing major, will science ever accept a properly done DNA sequence? What's going to happen? Are they going to say it's a fluke, it's contamination, in other words, does DNA have any hope in the next year or two?
In the next year or two?
Yeah, just a year or two.
I'll answer that by giving a broader answer, because I went through this when I did do my published thesis that I did at University of Wyoming on the first peopling of North America. I ran into the paradigm issue. Oh no, Clovis first. The 12,500 barrier. But then the data that I was putting into my thesis, even in the 90s, was like, look at these sites in South America that are dating, and it's not just one site, and it's not just one, possible mistake. We got Topper, we got Virginia, we've got Texas. There's all these sites in the new world that there's no way they could have come by foot at 12.5 when these sites are dating to 30,000. People just weren't digging. They stopped digging because they believed the paradigm. Then they started going back to these sites and digging deeper, and they started finding stone tools and arrowheads, Salutrian and stuff from Europe. Like how is stuff that we've only ever found from Europe archaeologically showing up at 20-some thousand or whatever years here when the first people came across the Bering Land Bridge at 12.5. So I bring up that point to say it's a paradigm, and it's hard to break through a paradigm shift of thinking. It's academic cognitive dissonance. I don't know if it's the old regime versus the new regime, but there are camps, just like there are Bigfoot camps, the Woo camp and the ape camp. And there's all these, I wish that all the camps would just be more open-minded and realize whatever
everybody just needs to be
true, but it doesn't mutually exclude what other people have seen and experienced. It doesn't mutually exclude that. And the more open we can be to those things that fit traditional science, the five senses, as we get into this quantum stuff, we start learning more and more about the quantum world. We got to come to a realization as scientists and with our scientific thinking that there are things that are going to go beyond our five senses, things that we can't see. And we know this, that are above the color spectrum, below the color spectrum, part of the electromagnetic, spectrum that you can see with technology, but that our evolution hasn't given us the capability to take an X-ray into our eyes and translate it into an image in our brains. But we know that some insects can see in the ultraviolet, some things can see in the infrared, especially the things that work around at night can see in those spectrums, which, side note, I think, again, that's a big reason why the trail cameras don't work with these things.
Well, let's stop right there for a second.
Sorry, you asked for it. You're getting it.
No, let's stop right there. It's such a cool topic. We talked about it last week. And I would love you, Carlos, when you get time, watch last week's show. The reason is I threw a theory out on something called porphyrins that I want to test Bigfoot hair for, because it does seem to put out a kind of an interesting, very faint, but interesting pink glow.
Is that with the lasers? Is that what you were talking about?
Under ultraviolet light.
Ultraviolet light. Okay.
So I had this theory, and please watch last week's show to get the whole theory, because it happened on an experience I had back in like the early 2000s when I was working on a bear documentary. A really fascinating thing happened to me, which got me thinking that Bigfoots can see in the UV spectrum, which, if you know anything about it, it's a more primitive eye. It's not a more advanced eye. It's a little more primitive. We've evolved our filters so we can't see in the UV spectrum. But the UV spectrum helps you see, protein content and plants and fruits, and it would help you see urine of animals you're hunting, toads, lizards, all these things that are peeing everywhere, mice. They've been there's a lot of good, credible stories of them eating rodents, like in the wintertime and so on. But a porphyrin is the same. It's a biological makeup, a molecular chain that causes flying squirrels to glow under UV light. They glow pink. And this is a recent discovery. They've proven caribou can see in the UV spectrum, which, if you believe in the land bridge crossings, Bigfoot would have crossed the same thing and had to live in the same environment that caribou did. Were they involved? Well, they see in UV. And maybe they can see in IR and UV. That wouldn't be out of the question, really. We've lost our ability because, you know, we live inside. We don't need to see. We don't go and eat munch on lichen anymore. But so I want to
speak for yourself.
I want to look for porphyrins. Well, some of us might eat lichen. I want to. There's some right here. I want to look for, you know, a number of compounds in Bigfoot hair, and that's just one thing that it does glow. You know, in a real true UV flashlight, and if you're looking through like an iPhone, where that's a little more sensitive to the UV than our own eyes, it glows very bright pink.
Yep.
And that tells me there's some property there, because why would an animal be able to see in UV if it didn't have some UV properties in its own hair?
And again, and look at some of the, just anecdotally, without, you know, getting into the scientific studies with UV lights and lasers. And I've seen some, and again, been privy to some stuff in Project Zoo Book that people have been doing, and definitely showing that what you're talking about. There are characteristics of these hairs, you yourself, with the oils and the waxes
yes,
that are left behind from faces
yep.
pushed up against windows and car windows and house windows, handprints that again are leaving behind a waxy substance that's not ours. Again, it's like the DNA question. Well, what is this? If it's not us, and if it's not an ape, and those are the only two things that make this particular.
But Carlos, here's some new info. I'm getting new info, including from even Esteban. I had a long conversation with Esteban, interviewed him for Legend Meets Science 2 on tape, and he talks about the gorillas making this waxy crap under their armpits.
Yep.
Which helps them grip things. I mean, you could go on and on, all of the reasons it would, this vernix type sebum, this thick waxy sebum, would help an animal, or even you or I, live out in the weather.
Well, I just read too that that all that oil in wet fur or wet hair can ferment, and that might be it's a possible explanation for the famous stink.
Smell.
The putrescine stink, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that could definitely ferment.
That wax, I mean, you could tell me better, because I've not found any myself, but you've said, and others have said, that wax has a scent to it. If you sniff that residue that's left behind from handprints, face prints, are there any feet or anything else that's left it behind? But basically body prints on people's vehicle glass and on their home glass.
Sometimes splattered. I just got a photo from a guy that was splattered all over his wall, going up like almost 8 feet.
Wow.
And it's like, oh man. So that maybe goes with the armpit.
Absolutely.
And then somebody on Zoobook mentioned gorillas, that they've witnessed these male gorillas coming out all agitated, and they had this white bubbly crap coming out from under their armpits, and they were smeared it on the glass, and they had a really hard time getting it off. And I thought,
that's the art piece. I remember, like, once it's on there, that stuff is really hard to get off. It's really like people with the handprints trying to get them off of their house, not being able to get them off of the car windows and things. So yeah, so there's stuff like that I think is just fascinating, scientifically. And you know, going back to the eyes, what do you guys think about people who witness eye glow or eye shine?
Let's talk about that.
Because
it's
to me,
interesting.
I had one encounter where it wasn't glow, but where the membrane in back, I've never seen a reflection like that before. It looked like two white reflectors on a tree. And I thought that that's what it was until the whoop followed and the other gibberish sounds, the vocalizations that I heard immediately after seeing this thing and realizing, oh my God, that's the biggest living thing I've ever seen. And I've lived in East Africa, and I've seen elephants and giraffes. In terms of something shaped like us, you know, something standing upright and whooping and whistling, this thing was huge. But only thing I could find was owls. Owls' eyes can reflect back white, but these were like white reflectors. What animal that big that whoops and whistles and gibberishes, blah, 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 what reflects that white? And so, yeah, I'm going to put it back to you guys about the eye shine versus the eye glow. I've never seen eyes emanate light myself.
But have you read the reports? There's some new scientific papers on finding these. I read another one here not that long ago, and I know I saved it in one of my messy files of just a very bit of protein cells left over in only humans that produce light. And they just finally had an experiment where they measured it in they had some woman subject, and they measured light being emitted from her eyes.
Wow.
Very faint though. And because we only have like 3 of these cells left. But if we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Again, yeah, if it was selected for.
Exactly. So once again, that's why is it that only humans have that? And so maybe it's a survival. I mean, could you imagine? Okay, let's think. How handy would that be? Well, you can imagine if you could just like, whoosh, I don't need a flashlight. I can just glow my eyes.
Make my eyes.
That'd be cool. You'd have like
that would be really cool. And then related to the light, the hair. Going back to the hair, you were talking about some scientific experiments, but again, going back to the anecdotal evidence, people when they say they see them in the daylight, say that their hair is so black, it's like it's taking in all the light and like almost like a black hole would. And so whatever the hair is doing with light waves, even though like when I saw one in the summer in the green foliage, it looked green. Like the hair didn't look black, but I knew the hair couldn't be green, but why was it appearing that way? There's so many weird optics that go on, but I definitely believe there's something unique about the hair. And so if we could get to that gene for their hair, those things in their hair, that would be in that DNA sequence, that would be the marker I'd want to be able to create, because we don't have that.
Yeah.
We don't have whatever that is.
Speaking of hair, you want to hear about the Kung Fu werewolf?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Hard to find some information, but I found a little bit. I apologize. I couldn't get a very good picture, but
there he is. That's
him.
Yep.
The Kung Fu werewolf. He was a Shaolin monk born in 1849 with hypertrichosis is the term we were looking for earlier.
Yep, that's correct.
So that's him. He's pretty famous apparently in
he's really
the Shaolin
famous
world.
in China.
Yeah.
Like really famous. Like they have there's pictures in all of the, their
Shaolin
training
temples and
studios. Because he was such a great warrior.
Yeah, pretty wild.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, I did a little bit of reading. That's worth a deep dive if anyone's interested.
Actually, I believe I've never heard
read
that.
it. Go ahead and read it. Jeff,
Thank
go ahead
you.
and read it.
We'll pull this back up.
Back up and read it. This is fascinating.
I can't. Let me pull up my. I can't read.
Oh, you can't read it because you're blind.
I can read it.
I am blind. Oh, go ahead.
Born in the Fujian province of China in 1849, Su Kong Tai Jin came into the world with a genetic abnormality called hypertrichosis. This caused his face to be covered by a thick, coarse hair. His parents, believing him to be possessed by a demon, imagine that, abandoned the infant Tai Jin in a forest near the Fujian Shaolin Temple. A passing monk discovered the child and took him back to the Shaolin Temple. The baby was named Tai Jin and nursed back to health. When the child came of age, he was allowed to begin training in Kung Fu. Because of his condition, Tai Jin rarely left the temple. Therefore, he spent most of his time in chores or training. Most monks at Shaolin were evaluated and placed with a single master for their martial arts education, but Tai Jin was given access to all the masters of the temple. After many years, he had done what no one else had ever done, master all martial arts styles of Shaolin. Due to his amazing ability and adeptness in Kung Fu, Tai Jin was given the title of Grand Master of the Martial Arts Program of Fujian Temple. Grandmaster Tai Jin was a master of the Death Touch or Kima. And then it goes on.
Yeah,
wow.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. I need to learn more about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna bookmark that and go back and do a deep dive. That's really interesting.
Don't you find it a little coincidental that all the people that have this seem to be great athletes? I just find that a little interesting.
Well, you're definitely presenting something that, again, I've not studied anything beyond, like most of them ended up, working in a career that was
I don't know of any person with hypertrichosis that is not an athlete.
And I don't know any person with hypertrichosis that's not either just in the movies or in the circus, doing trapeze and doing an act. There was even a Little House on the Prairie with, I think, a wild boy or something, but that one, I don't think he had hypertrichosis.
And by the way, there was a comment, and I do want to address it. Also, Stone Picker had an interesting comment about algae growing on their hair. Jeff came up with a really good comment last week. Jeff, you had mentioned that the lack of medulla would help them possibly make their hair hydrophobic.
Yeah, possibly.
Or maybe flotation. Excuse me. They're known as, water apes, and along many people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They don't
Especially up in British Columbia.
Well, how about even in Northern California? These things don't seem to want to stray too far from water.
There are people. I didn't get anybody, for my film that told the story, but I've heard stories about them being seen in the Klamath River, in the Smith River, basically doing like a frog stroke or a breaststroke crossing. But a lot of times they can simply walk across places where we would have to swim, the larger ones. But to Stone Picker's point, just one quick thing, I am seeing a couple of comments pop up. To his point, that the one I was talking about, that was on the border of Pennsylvania and New York in 2019 in the summertime. But I do like his thought, though, that there's, especially out here, there'd be moss and, other thing could be growing on their hair if they don't groom themselves. But oddly, my experience with the hair has been, they look like they come out of the Bigfoot beauty parlor. I mean, the hair looks like doll hair. It looks clean. It looks neat. The ones that I've, again, seen in other people as well. But then I've also heard the stories of the disheveled look, things, intermeshed into their hair, leaves and sticks and, deer antlers or who knows what.
Well, it could be geographic differences. It could be like a racial differences. Some, perfect example is I like to think about is orcas, killer whales. Different parts of the world, they act very, very different, even though they're the same species. So who knows? Also, the swimming, the aquatic thing we talked about last week too, that's a possible reason for the giant, the disproportionately large chest. It would have, massive lungs would definitely be helpful if they swim a lot.
And underwater. Greg brings up a really good comment that maybe Bigfoots are highly loaded with testosterone.
You think?
So,
or people hypertrichosis.
But that should be one thing. I actually have a blood sample coming.
Yeah.
I have a really highly vetted blood sample coming. And I definitely want to test it for testosterone, which would be overlooked. We're going to do DNA. No, I want to get some of the other properties. There's a whole host of tests. The guy collected it and froze it right away.
Oh, nice.
And it had just started to coagulate when he collected it.
Wow.
And the story behind it's amazing.
I was going to say, I wish that that's a great teaser.
Oh, you think?
I want to know more about that.
Well, you're going to wait. Yeah, you're going to wait for Legend Meets Science. People keep going, when is it going to be done? I'm like, do you not want this information?
Yeah, I want it to be.
Think of how much cool stuff you've added.
Yeah, I'm adding all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, there's no reason to rush it. You're going to put a lot of information in there.
But maybe I'll release like part one, then part two. You know what I mean? Do it in sections. Because I'm just getting so much cool stuff. Okay. But wouldn't it be great if we could do a testosterone test on Bigfoots? Wouldn't that be amazing if they had 100-fold what a human had?
Yeah.
That would be fascinating because they do have extraordinary muscles. And I guarantee, we know what happens when regular human males take steroids and supplement that stuff. Well, do you know what steroids do to a person? Does that boost your testosterones? And everybody knows I'm on lots of steroids. I'm joking. It's a joke.
Adrenosteroid, and then you've got.
And that's horse hormones, isn't it?
Yeah, and those hormones, affect the pituitary to create other hormones, and the gonads, in the males, testes is where you get most of your testosterone.
Yeah.
But then it begs the question: what if you had a female Sasquatch's blood? Would it show higher than normal testosterone levels compared with human females? or would we see, higher estrogen levels? I don't know. I mean, certainly looking at Patty and the Patterson-Gimlin film, I wouldn't know what to think. I wouldn't immediately think that they had more estrogen. I would think, that those ladies are jacked with way more testosterone, the females in that species. But again,
right.
We have a limited sample. With your one blood sample, that's going to be limited. But just like anything, going back to your earlier question about, well, wouldn't that just lead to scientists saying, no, we need more and more and more? Yeah, right. Science is always going to want more and more and more, so that we can absolutely say, you know what? No, there's no more. It could be this. We've narrowed it down. Like, we've now got all these different lines of information, whether it's the DNA, the testosterone, all that.
Okay, look at Tristan's comment, or Caillou up there.
Yeah,
that's a great observation.
Sure.
It really is.
I mean, I wonder though, are they, if you would measure the square inch, hairiness, how that compares to female gorilla or female chimp, in terms of the coverage of the chest area.
Well, actually, okay, like somebody had mentioned that blood will be from an animal the Bigfoot killed or stepped on. It's unlikely, because on its left foot, it was in this tracks, and then his left foot was dripping and still like coagulating on the rock. Mm-hmm. I don't think walking would collect that. If you'd stepped in blood, I don't think it would be dripping off, because it came to a bluff, it sat down and left a butt print. And then where the left foot was, which matched the footprints with the blood, there was blood dripping on a rock. And the guy was smart enough to collect the whole damn rock.
Doug, you know what I wish you could recreate?
What?
I wish you could recreate from your first Sasquatch Meets Science, that cabin that you guys flew into, where you put the board with the screws.
Yeah.
But instead of the screws, had DNA little capture points underneath there, so that any blood that might have come down and didn't get stuck on the screw could trickle into some little vials that were on the inside or on the bottom of that board. That'd be another great thing. I know. Unfortunately,
the problem is that fat tissue and actual meat that was left on those screws was dried in the sun and had been left outside for numerous years. I was surprised they wiggled anything out of that, but there were supposedly, some divergent genes. They didn't get a huge sequence, but that were divergent in chimps on that board in Ontario, which was a screw board. It was not a board I put out. It was just left there as a deterrent to keep bears out.
Bears, right?
It's a pretty bear deterrent, yeah.
But I just thought, wow, that could lead to some great data. Again, even if we don't have the money or the ability to fully sequence, if we could see the chromosomes and compare them to our chromosomes, if there were any chromosomal differences, maybe they have a different number of chromosomes, maybe one of their chromosomes is longer, without even getting into the deep genetics of it, that for me would be fascinating to see the karyotyping. But,
I wonder what the testosterone level in a gorilla is compared to a human.
Yeah, I mean, you'd want averages, of course, in different age groups, and probably a whole populations of male, populations of female, gorilla versus chimp. That's a great Zoo Book question.
Carlos, do you want to try to get the answer to that?
I know some questions I'm going to be asking in my next
good
meeting with the people that are around those animals.
Oh my god! I'm trying to think here. Where we want? What time is it? 9:45. Are you okay to visit for more?
Yeah, I can go for a little longer.
Oh, good. Okay, Jeff, you're okay.
Sure.
Jeff sounds okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for finding that samurai or kung fu or whatever the hell that.
Yeah, no problem.
I read that. I'm telling you, I read that 15 years ago. I still remembered it though.
My Google foo is strong.
You are good, because I tried to find it for some other guy and I couldn't find it. And I'm like, damn it. The algorithm and the Google search engine have been, they put things that are popular, not things that are obscure.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you give them an exact description, it's gone all to hell.
And there's definitely some shenanigans with that algorithm that they favor certain things artificially.
Yeah, I'd say. Okay, so we've covered a lot of stuff. We covered the eyes. We covered skin sebum. We've covered testosterone. We've covered DNA. We've covered a lot of topics, right? What would you like to talk about, Carlos?
what I've been wondering about lately, related to some of the topics we talk about, is again that although you've brought up some things that now they're no longer in the other, they're in the, oh wow, there's humans that have these cells in our eyes still that light up. I was not aware of that, because I'm always wondering, like, okay, we got the octopus in the ocean.
They actually measured the glow.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what you got to do. Again, you got to do that. It's scientifically. You got to know how many of these do we have. What do our closest relatives have? Somebody needs to be now studying that in gorillas and chimps. Do they have any of these?
No, that I did read. They don't have any.
So that then puts that piece of evidence into the Venn diagram of more like us and not more like the apes. So again, leaning more that direction. And I say leaning because I'm a scientist. Data as it comes in can move me from one camp to the other, but that's why I don't like to be in a camp. I'm leaning to what this camp believes. I'm leaning towards what that camp believes, but it's based on all the evidence. I like to take the whole body of everything that we know, the totality of the information that we have. And so to your 10,000 reports, to the scientific studies that are being done. But what I wonder about a lot lately is to go back to, for instance, to the hair and or the eyes. Are these people that have been documenting what, for all intents and purposes, would be, well, let me preface it. I started to preface it with this octopus. The octopus can settle itself on a substrate, and somehow its cells know what that under substrate should look like in the light, because it's in the dark if it's on it. But then it translates that to the cells on top, and somehow those cells perfectly match, relatively close, that substrate, so that these things, camouflage and blend in. I think you probably know where I'm going with this. Yes, they can use the lines of the branches and the trees to hide and be at a distance and be peeking, the peeking behavior. But what about this? A lot of people seeing these things translucently or partially translucent, and then somewhat lit up. Again, is it? I've been wondering: is it our eyes? Is it what we can see, or is it how the light is interacting with their bodies? Those are the questions that I've been pondering a lot lately. Again, I've been spending a lot of time reading a lot of quantum stuff lately, trying to understand this quantum world and entanglement. And then it makes me think and wonder about, well, how does this apply to the Bigfoot world? And of course, the guy who did the famous recordings, oh my gosh, his name's escaping me, the audio recordings, he wrote the book, The Quantum Bigfoot. Oh my gosh, how am I blanking? Anyways,
that doesn't sound clear to me.
The 1971 audio recordings, the Sierra Sounds.
Oh, the Sierra Sound, sure.
Al and oh my gosh, I'm really embarrassed. Anyways,
I can't recall either.
But
I know what you're talking about.
He writes a book and he talks about it, but I'm trying to get deep into the understanding of what we know, what these scientists are finding out. Ron Moorhead, thank you, Sasquatch Wizard.
Thank you.
It's been a long day, like I said.
Yeah.
Caffeine only keeping me excitable, but my brain's not functioning as well as it used to. No, but that I wonder about that. Like, I wonder, okay, again, if I'm trying to give credence to these stories that sound that's out there, what could be going on? What, like, for instance, my own experience, how can I hear something walking outside of my tent and pacing back and forth by my camping partner's tent, and then jump out with a flashlight with no cover and nothing be there? I don't know how to explain that, but I've experienced that. I've experienced that weird dome of silence in East Texas, in Pennsylvania, where something else then happens with it that makes me think it's possibly Sasquatch related or Bigfoot related, skunk ape related, whatever you want to call it in the region that you're in. But there's something going on with either our sense of hearing, sense of seeing, observing scientifically, or something that is more germane to them. And I really have been thinking and just doing mental.
Well, when you think about it, it's kind of amazing that we can perceive anything accurately at all. There's so many things that can affect human perception chemically, things in the air, your hormones. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can affect our perception. So who knows? I mean, I agree with you. Who knows? I don't know.
It's just weird the coincidences of actually hearing something that's very clear and that the other person could also hear.
Right.
And then, and I had, and this instance that I'm speaking of happened in, I think it was 2020. I had game cameras set up in all 4 cardinal directions from the inside of the campsite facing out in this location. And none of them caught anything except for the same weird stuff that I get once in a while, which is like what looks like orangutan arm hair, some weird white shots, not actually taking a picture of anything in particular. And then other times just blurry images or things that look like they could be bugs. It gets really kind of strange when you combine what the cameras actually capture, what you're hearing, but with what you can't see when you jump out with a flashlight and there's nothing there. And then again, in those instances where I don't necessarily haven't seen them, but something has happened that made me think it was them, but there's that weird dome of silence where my ears feel like they're like there's fingers in them or something. Like you can't, I don't know how to describe what I'm talking about other than to say I've experienced it. I know other people have experienced it and reported experiencing it. And I did see a question that came through there.
Oh yeah. So I want to ask you about this because
about the hum.
We've been working on this. It's not really a hum. It's more of, Jeff, do you want to throw that clip up so Carlos can hear it?
Oh God! There's one sound I've heard that was part of that sequence when I saw those eyes within 5 minutes, right next to us, a loud whoop, and then a return.
Whoop, yeah.
I'm sorry, my whistle with mustache and beard, I can't whistle anymore. But it was a 2-toned response, and then off in a distance, it was this weird humming metallic voice.
Okay, stop right there. That's probably exactly what we're talking about.
When I saw that, I was like,
it does sound a bit metallic. It can even itch your ear. It's like it
was far off. I don't
cross between. Yeah, it can be far off, but you still hear it. It can be like hummingbird wings, or
like a vibration.
Yeah, like a
vibration. That's the way I try to describe it. I said I've said it's like, remember when we were kids and we talked into a fan, Luke, I am your father. You're talking into the fan and the fan chops up your voice and it makes that weird vibration back at you that you hear, but you also kind of feel it a little bit. It was like that, but it wasn't like a fan. It was like a metal vibration. It was as though whatever this thing was had a metallic vocal cord in addition to its vocal cords.
I have a sample of it here that I recorded up at Snowgrove. We recorded like an hour of it. It's so weird. It's like oh man, I can't even describe it. I get too excited when I think about it because it could offer so much info and a great research tool for all of us if we could play those sounds and they could, attract these creatures. It'd be another thing like wood knocking and, whooping and all the things that we do, crazy things.
For me, ethically, that goes back to the question of if we don't know what they're saying, if we don't know what that message means, I don't know about putting it out there like, hey,
No, I realize, but it gets a reaction and brings them close. So
you can at least have an experience.
I think they can take it.
You might be getting.
I have a feeling they can handle it just fine. We don't know what we're doing, but let me look here now. Dang it.
I see the Bigfoot.
There we go.
Predator clicking sound. I've heard people hear the clicking sound. And I wonder if what you're saying that some people confuse that for the sounds of like tapping rocks too, because that clicking that the predator makes and those rock tapping sounds. I have heard in the daytime crows make kind of a weird sound like that, but it's not the same. I think I know what he's talking about. I haven't heard that myself. I've heard other people's audio.
So it sounded a little bit like a metallic buzz kind of
but like something was trying to speak with that buzz going on.
Yeah.
But it was very unclear because at that point when that sound was coming, that's when the roosters and the dog and everything else started reacting to these things. And so I had a cacophony of sounds, but the last sound I distinctly heard was that weird sound. And that's the only sound I've never been able to really describe in a very specific way. A whoop I can explain, and I can almost kind of imitate what it sounded like, but way, the amplitude way higher than I can make with my lungs and my lips. The whistle, again, people whistle. This is, again, it's like a freight train was whistling back at this thing. The lungs behind those 2 tones and how loud that pitch was at that time of night was, again, not something I can attribute to any known animal. Even a person, I don't know. You'd have to be the world record holding whistler to make the sound that I heard respond to that whoop. But that third sound, I caught the beginning of it before the rest of the animals were chiming in, and it was weird. It was just a weird one.
And then Todd asks, where can you send it? You could send it to me and I get it to David in a digital file, or you can turn it into a digital file, Todd, and get it to both me and David Ellis. But if you've got that hum too recorded, we need it. So it's important.
One of the next studies that I want to do locally once I'm done with this movie, before I start like going back out and doing research, is I want to do some research on people and record them with a good recorder, just going whoop, and then as loud as they can, whoop. And I want to record their demographics, male, female, age. And then I want to put that into Audacity and use the spectrograph and start to compare them and look for similarities and differences, and then compare the average of those, or the range of those, with, again, these alleged Bigfoot whoops, so that I can really show people there's a difference. You know, so many people are like, oh, it could just be a person out there. Yeah, a person can go out and make that sound, but the signature that it leaves on a sound graph isn't the same. And that's the next kind of little mini project I've got for myself as a break between this movie and whatever I do next. But that's one that I want to deal with related to what you're saying here and what he's saying. And I'm hoping maybe David Ellis, might give me a hand with some of that, because I know
absolutely,
he's got a lot more data than I do.
Absolutely, yeah, he's really doing amazing work.
Yeah, he is.
Shout out to the Olympic Project guys. I mean, I really love the work that you guys are doing up there, as well as other groups. Not to discount anyone, but since we're talking about David Ellis,
yeah, there's a lot of people working hard, no question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wished I had scientific method down. I'm just my brain is just, it's always going. And then it's cool when dots connect, even though they may not really be connected in real life, it really does put you on a path, of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And we can distinguish some more things with these creatures versus the same. There's been very few, we had the wood knocks. We've had, we had footprints. Then it was the latent details in the footprints, right? That was a big breakthrough. When we got the word out on Legend Meets Science 1, and then it was, there's been these skookum. There's been little increments of cool things, but I
thought that one of the big steps in the scientific community, at least again through Dr. Jeff Meldrum, was him getting a species named by the footprint.
Yeah,
again, not in the whole universe of scientists, but it is now accepted and been given a scientific name that these footprints do belong to. They've been given a species name by at least a portion of the scientific community that is accepted them, based on his efforts with the the biomechanics.
Well, what's more exciting than Legend Meets Science 2 is Jeff's writing Legend Meets Science 2 book, and we're going to have a lot of videos and audio in the book. So it'll be a really visceral experience.
I'm looking forward to that a lot.
So that book I'm really excited, and he's working on it, and
like a QR code type thing where you can
it'll have QR codes,
the audios and videos. I'm really excited for that evolution of books.
It's amazing. It's really, really cool.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to look at the comments are coming in so quick. I can't keep up. I focus on one and then it bleeps up.
Just as an aside, Carlos, Doug published the Freeman Files book. Hanger One published the Freeman Files book that has all of that immersive book technology. I cannot recommend that book highly enough. Everybody should own that. Everybody in the audience should own that book. It's amazing. It's great.
And what animals whoop? What the hell? There's no animals in the forest that whoop. I can't identify any birds, any mammals, nothing whoops. And yet we hear it, and it's been recorded so many times. I mean, that alone should get scientists excited.
Well, and again, the spectrogram doesn't match the human range of.
No, there's one, especially the long calls. The whole bottom fundamental is missing. It's just missing. Where humans can't. I mean, even an impressionist or somebody skilled in that, no matter what they do to try to mimic any of these sounds, there always shows that fourth fundamental with a Bigfoot recording. that bottom fundamental is gone. It's just gone. And our brains make up for the missing fundamental, and we hear it, but it doesn't show up on the spectrogram.
Huh.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. The whole thing is just like, what the heck?
Well, and that they, with intention, many of the recordings do have sub 20 hertz infrasound.
Yeah.
Tones that, why would they be able to make that unless something could hear it? And, it could be an artifact, but you have to wonder about, well, if it's not an artifact, then who's hearing it? We can't hear that. Our ears, again, science of 5 senses, our ears can only hear in a range. Some people can hear a little higher, some people can hear a little lower, but I don't know anybody that can hear, 5 to 15 or 10 to 20 hertz. Maybe close to 20, but again, getting down below 15, I don't know of any, special genetically altered human, that can hear down in that range.
So have you heard any gibberish?
That's what got me back into this. The whole Chronicles of Carlos started in 2019, 2018.
Get into
because I had an encounter with my partner Renee. We were up in came down through Canada, and we'd made our way into New York, and we were at a Native American up by the Finger Lakes. We'd gone to a museum that was one of the Iroquois Nation museums. So it was the people that were there were Mohawk. And they were like, I was telling them I'm driving back to my hometown in Pennsylvania, and I'll be going through the Allegheny National Forest on the foothills of the Allegheny Mountains. And I said, I wanted to go down through there. And they're like, oh, well, that's where Gahai is. I was like, Gahai. And then these docents told me their stories of seeing things there and having experiences on this hill right next to this casino, like not too far along the Allegheny River. And just a long story made short, because I know we're getting late. We drove to that spot, and I was taking pictures of these down trees, and I got out of the car to take these pictures. And at the top of that mountain, that was the first time I've ever heard them in my life. And my other encounters, they were quiet. I never heard, them make any kind of vocalization. But the first time I heard it was there at the New York, Pennsylvania border in 2019. And, it was the samurai chatter. It was from the top of the mountain. And it was so loud that like I was feeling it viscerally. I was hearing it, but it was like it was hitting my body. The main torso, like down to my diaphragm, part of my body felt like I was feeling the sounds. And then behind me, much closer, this was at the top of the mountain of Gahai, but behind me, between me and the Allegheny River, which was maybe 40 or 50 yards down off of this little road, there was whoop, whoop, whoop. And then this thing went from whooping behind me. So it would whoop, I would turn, and then behind me, the gibberish would go. And then it sounded like there was another one coming down, crunch, crunch, crunch. And then eventually it stopped, and I kept hearing branches break. The one on the top sounded off maybe 3 times. The whooper sounded off about 6 times, but each time it started with whooping, and then it started whoop, woof, woof, and it started to sound more like a dog. And by the time I got around the car, and this is on my YouTube channel from around that time, just from my iPhone quality, I ran around and you see me filming Renee. I said, honey, I know you heard that. She wouldn't get out of the car. So she rolled her window down, and I said, I know you heard it. And as I was saying that, it went off again. I said, okay, what did you just hear? And she says in the video, well, it sounded to her like, and she's from Crescent City, California, here at the coast. She said to her, it sounded like a barking seal. And I'm like, okay, well, we both know there's no
kind
seals,
of a metallic
seals, but
sound.
that's what it was mimicking. Like it started whooping, and then it started to try to mimic, to me, what it sounded like. It was trying to sound like a dog, but by the end, it wasn't getting it right. Even to her ear, she said it sounded like a barking seal. And you can hear that last part on the audio, because again, it's just my iPhone, and it's again a 55-mile-an-hour road that I'm just pulled over on, and there's traffic going by. It just rained, so you get the noise of tires. But yeah, that was the first time I heard it. Whoever asked, and I did. I heard the gibberish, the samurai chatter, whatever you want to call it. I heard what sounded like something coming down the hillside, breaking branches as it stepped, and then a spot where it just sounded like something was just breaking branches. And then down below me, this closer one, whooping, woofing, barking, or I don't know. Again, to your point, it was weird, and it was the first time. So 20 some years have gone by, because the last encounter I'd had before that was when I was in graduate school, you know, and that encounter was almost 20 some years after my childhood encounter. So, and one happened in Pennsylvania. So this one was close to the same, you know, neck of the woods, if you will, to where I had my first encounter, but she was with me and she heard at least one of them. She didn't get out of the vehicle for the one up on the hill, but I fully experienced that. And at that point, I couldn't stop getting back into the subject. You know, most of you, your audience, especially when, you know, we did that Bigfoot influencers book or whatever, you know, one of the biggest things, who's this guy? Well, that's because nobody knew me unless you were around in the, you know, in the 90s when I was, you know, his TA and, you know, doing presentations on my, you know, thesis that wasn't done. You wouldn't have known me because I wasn't on social media. I wasn't on any listservs or groups. So that's when I started to try to create the Chronicles of Carlos, to tell my story of the experiences I had, and to just start to find out what have I missed in all these years, because there's something about hearing them that just brought it to another level, especially that language like gibberish. That got me obsessed again with the topic.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is it's beyond fascinating. The fact that so many people go, there's nothing to it. It's just a bunch of crap. I see that, especially when Bigfoot posts end up in the regular mainstream population. The mainstream population makes very disparaging remarks to this day. I mean, to this day, it's not good. But when we're on Facebook, generally the groups, those comments and posts get steered to the groups, then it's all good. But man, I'll tell you, people are still really mean. You know, when they you know, if somebody comes across this podcast from the general, they're not interested in these mysteries, they're just going to be disparaging. And it's sad because it's kind of like, don't you want to learn anything?
I will say that when Paul Fazinski, the Wild Man of the Woods, when he interviewed me last summer to do a little documentary about just my encounters, my stories.
Yeah.
When he posted it on YouTube, I was pleasantly surprised that I would say about 90% of the comments weren't the trolls.
They were okay. Good.
They were either okay or very positive, and I got to do I felt like some really great interaction when that first came out with people and touch base and make some new connections. But there, you know, there's always going to be people that are like, oh yeah, what's he smoking? Oh yeah, you know, sure he saw Bigfoot, you know, and you know what? I understand it. It's the cognitive dissonance. If you haven't yourself seen it, you know, I get it. And again, to have more than one, you know, encounter, and especially to have more than one visual encounter or audio, you know, audible vocalization encounter, those are rare. I mean, the number of times where I've felt their presence but not seen or heard them or found a track or had anything else other than like, oh, there's that weird silence again. Where's that feeling that something is watching me? But you know, those stories I'm not going to sit and tell because they happen more often than those very rare other occasions. And again, there's people though that have spent way more time in the woods than I have, that either in their heads, they've probably been around them and their brains have said, no, that's a bear. Oh, that's a woodpecker. Oh, that's whatever satisfies them to continue doing what they're doing. Cause that's our brain's reaction. I don't blame them any more than I blame anybody. I don't like it when they're, you know, particularly cruel with their comments and, you know, insensitivity is fine. You gotta be able to tolerate differing opinions and skepticism. And I'm all for that. I'm a scientist. I want skepticism, but when you just go to ad hominem attacks and ignore any of the details that a person's sharing, then I don't really think that you're going about it scientifically. I don't think that you're really being a critical thinker. You're just being critical.
Right.
And there's a difference. There's a difference between being a critical thinker and being critical.
Yeah. And I do wonder, trying to predict, how do you think this mystery is going to end, Carlos? Is it going to be DNA? Is it going to be a body that gets hit by a semi, or is it going to be through government disclosure? Or God, this got to end.
It would have to be the third. I mean, again, there's no scientist that's going to be able to, again, unless they're the one that hits it or somehow accidentally comes across a body. I mean, those possibilities are still out there, but I don't know. There've been enough even though the bell curve of those stories of people either shooting one or hitting one and there being a body thereafter are limited. And because they're outliers, I take them as that. I take them as outliers, but I still accept that those people aren't lying for the most part. But because they're outliers, I have to take those more with a grain of salt because they don't fall into the they deviate from the mean too much from the average encounter. Doesn't mean they're not true. Again, in anybody's interpretation of anybody's story, they might be right. The person might have perceived something completely wrong. But
flat.
That's me.
I figured it was Carlos.
I don't know how to turn it off. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Just people probably asking me questions to answer on here, but I don't want to look at it. I apologize, Flat. And I didn't realize that my gain was that high. I thought it was low enough that it wouldn't pick it up.
No, he's so good. Well, we can take it. I think Flat's he's just giving us crap. He's doing it with humor. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's every story, there's some truth to it, I think. Whether it's embellished or not, but I definitely think that there's something with the vocalizations. Then again, going back to our earlier part of our conversation, the vocalizations part. If that's just vocalizations, okay, so we've got primates that vocalize.
Yeah.
But if there's something to that hum, if there's something to that gibberish, and again, we hopefully many in the audience will know that there's a Navy code breaker who said, yeah, those are morphemes. That's a language of some sort. And if that's a language, the only things with language are us, other than those things that mimic us, and they only mimic us. They don't create new phraseology. They mimic things that they've heard, like parrots and whatnot. But those are morphine streams, according to at least one person. I would like more of those scientists to study these. What David Ellis and others have recorded, and come to the same conclusion, or come to their own conclusions. So we have something to compare to. Again, he might be right. I know that it certainly felt like a language to me when I heard.
Well, let me play one that's definitely a language that we recorded up in Snow Grove, right in the middle of nowhere. There's not even radio waves up there. There's nothing. And this came across. We brought cameras up, and we could monitor them live, right, through Wi-Fi, or through Starlink. And so this came. Let me preface it. These cameras were hidden. Something went around and threw a rock at each camera to kind of let us know they knew where they were, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of that one. And that was kind of surprising. It's why we were all like listening and like really attentive to our cameras, because the rocks were hitting them. And then this came over the live. So this happened live. We heard this. Freaked us out. Let me turn up my volume here. I've played this before. I can't get enough of it. I listen to it every day. You hear that okay?
Yeah, I can't. It doesn't sound like anything
No, but it's just like, it's either gibberish, but it's a very deep voice, right? It's a very male sounding voice. I can't make out what he's saying. It says kind of like, you could say, well, it sounds like a guy going, I'll talk with you. But I don't think that's not what David's seeing. And when he analyzes it.
I talk with you. I could hear that.
It's almost Native American like.
I talk with you.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that's again. And when you hear that,
well, when I recorded it, then I can get excited because I know there's no fakery involved, or
I was so mad that because I switched over from camera mode to video mode when I heard that gibberish, and I recorded it, and I could hear it 2 more times, but the camera didn't pick up the audio. And so definitely one of the things I want to be able to invest in is a better, microphone system, because what my ears were hearing, I wasn't able to capture that as well, if at all. And I did. David Ellis was the first person I was able to reach out to as I drove west and headed back to California. I went north first and went up to meet with to see Dr. Jeff Meldrum speak in Spokane. Then I tried to go out to Seattle and tried to meet with David, but he was busy that weekend. But I did share it with him, and then some BFRO guys, Bigfoot Field Research and Organization guys down in near Portland in southern Washington State, Longmont.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating. That was Scott Nelson that did a lot of the breakthroughs on the foamings of the.
That's his name, Scott Nelson. Yeah, he was the Navy breaker guy.
I got to spend like 4 days with Scott. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met.
And there was the guy actually at my alma mater, the University of Wyoming, that analyzed those original Sierra Sounds tapes and authenticated them. That there's no, that they weren't altered or tampered with.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think that. What I like about your programs that you've been able to put out is that those expose the general public to the actual science that's been going on and to some of the actual physical evidence. It's not just somebody's TikTok video that's thrown up with no,
context.
No context.
Yeah.
What is this? And one out of every 2 or 3 of those is just some, buddy going for clicks. I like, and that's what I'm trying to do with this documentary, is just give people stories, but I like it. I like the scientific approach you take. And, it's one of the reasons I enjoy coming back to your show, because that's what I want. I want to share the anthropological side, which is the stories. Like, folklore and stories are important just as much as the evidence. But as a scientist, I want that, as a hard scientist, I want to share what the physical evidence is that we have that makes the case, that absolutely makes the case for not just where these things are being seen, how many of these things are being seen at the tip of the iceberg, but all the evidence that's also being collected, the trace evidence that's being left behind, just like at a crime scene, that is unattributable to anything known. And again, that's kind of the goal of the category card system that I use in the docuseries that I'm putting together, is to kind of show that there's lots of different elements of these things that, yes, if any one by itself, you could say, oh, bear, human. But when you take these things together, you start to eliminate all their possibilities. And the more you get, even if you throw away all of them, there's that even just one, then that's going to, I think, for the audience who isn't a knower, that is curious, that wants to believe, or is a true skeptic, is a true critical thinker going, I think that'll help them, shift a little bit. And the more we shift, like you said, it's baby steps. I don't think that in my lifetime, we're going to prove that Bigfoot exists, no matter what I say, no matter what you say or anybody, unless, media, mainstream media or the government was involved in some way. The scientific community, I don't think, has that voice. I don't think the knowers, the believers, I'd like to believe that maybe Project Zoo Book someday, some of the members, put something out or do a collaboration with you or someone else where, they share some of this other data. Again, scientific data, I think, is the most important way to.
Well, for instance, a letter that everybody signed could go for some grant, but if everybody got together and all of your credentials combined, might have some power in numbers.
It might. And that's beyond my purview. We need to talk to somebody who is a grant reader or a grant writer, and for whatever institution that we're trying to apply to. And I was really good at those in my 20s, but I haven't done any grant writing in a long, long time. That would have to be somebody else. But I absolutely would be interested in helping out with a project like that, collaborating with a project like that. Just as I've told you in the past, I'm more than happy to do whatever I can, to help on your projects or anybody else who's as long as you're taking the subject seriously and it's, not to be made into a joke. I'm happy to do a podcast. I'm happy to do, write a section of your book or whatever, with what I know and with what I think, and, to tie it in, because again, the more information that's put out there in a serious way, the more serious I think the topic will get taken. I mean, just look at how far we've come with UFOs and, UAPs and, from in my lifetime, it was a joke. And now the Pentagon says that, yes, these things are real. And as soon as that happened, so to answer your question, I take the UFO paradigm and how that shifted. And again, how did that shift? The biggest shift happened when there started to be hearings in front of Congress, when the Pentagon, stepped forward, not to say that that's misinformation, disinformation, but it's now in the public eye coming from that authority, those authorities. It's not coming from the scientific community. UFO stuff is, we're not taking major advances from, scientists studying this, unless you want to talk about, some of the people that have worked as scientists for the government or for the military.
The latest whistleblowers that are coming out, like Jake Barber, who apparently was on a UAP task force to pick them up. He would get assigned. He was a helicopter pilot and get assigned to go pick them up. And some of his stories are absolutely crazy. You just think, I just wonder how many people are going to believe this, but yet he's so highly vetted,
Well, my final answer to kind of wrap up that idea, because I'm not a conspiracy person, but to wrap it up, we've come a long way in the shift of the paradigm of UFOs, your crackpots, to where we're at today.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is the highly credentialed whistleblowers. Now, again, whether they're spreading information, that's propaganda, or whether they're speaking the truth to reality, that remains to be seen. But the fact that authority is now speaking on the subject, and we now know as a general public that there are special access projects that we fund, those trillions of missing dollars, that there are unspecified special access projects, the USAPs. If we've got USAPs for UAP stuff, we've got USAPs for Bigfoot stuff. That's just my personal belief, my absolute opinion. I've got no evidence to support that other than logical thinking of, if we're funding these projects, then we're definitely funding these other projects, especially if there's physical evidence that 10,000 people at the tip of the iceberg are reporting and feel comfortable enough to come forward and share. I absolutely believe that our government has USAPs that are involved in that, which means that the government itself or the military or the intelligence community, they're not directly involved, but para groups are, just like they are with the UAPs. That's me.
You would think there'd be a couple of people studying the Bigfoot mystery and kind of what's going on. You would think. You just would. Because it's been such a mystery, maybe they don't know anything, but even if they don't, you think they still would have a couple of people assigned to at least part-time, keep an eye
follow up, to
going on.
Listen to the chatter, hey, I just shot a Bigfoot. I think that
exactly.
was said over a phone line and an email. Some AI bot would pick that up, and that would be forwarded to somebody somewhere as a keyword. Now, again, I'm trying not to sound conspiratorial, because as I said that, I was like, that just sounds like a conspiracy. I'm just giving you my logical deduction based on what I've watched happen with the paradigm of UAP UFOs. In terms of, you asked me, will we see a change if there's a major paradigm shift? Again, coming from those sources, the government or major media, then perhaps we'll start to see and learn more about what they've known, or they do know, if anything at all, perhaps all along.
This comment's awesome. Conspiracy theories would be better if they'd quit coming true. That's a great comment. That's a great comment. And then Stone Picker's got a remark here about code words that he had heard on Sasquatch Chronicles from some guest. So it's fascinating too. It's interesting.
And I did the Chronicles of Carlos as kind of a tip of the hat to that podcast, because when I had that encounter in 2019, that was the first step back into the kind of the Bigfoot world, was listening to that podcast and those stories and realizing, oh my God, there are other people that Jenkins, what's his name? William Jevning, he was part of that show early on, and realizing that there were people doing this. Oh my gosh, I've been living my life from, my 20s. I wasn't involved in the Bigfoot world at all, hadn't had any encounters. I'd become a teacher, and I was teaching, coaching. And then 2019 happens. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I started to look into like, who else is doing this? And I came across that. And so I told him that that was a tip of the hat to him, that my title, for my brand was going to be based on my first foray back into who's talking about this. And there was a show where he had people on and he let them just tell their stories. And from an anthropological perspective, that's what I liked, that he didn't like jump in, and he kind of mostly lets them tell their tale. And so that was my first taste of this, like there was a whole world out there of people that were interested in these camps. Like I didn't even know that there was, any of this stuff. It's all been new to me over the last few years, but I've now been back kind of into the mix for about 5 years now. So hopefully
where can people get a hold of you? You're obviously, I think you have a good presence on Facebook.
Yeah, I enjoy getting messages there. I check my messenger as often as I can. Emails, I'm going to update my emailer because I actually got some really great tips and great stories by email, but the email, I don't know if it's active anymore. So I've got, again, the movie, once this movie's done, I'm going to get my whole presence updated there. But YouTube comments, I follow up with those people that comment on stuff. Well,
the best way to get a hold of you
Facebook Messenger.
Facebook Messenger.
Yeah, Facebook Messenger. I do get some really good questions there, and other people then will like, hey, I heard, like I'm seeing some of the stuff that's scrolling by here in the chat. And when I get off work, I love coming home and catching some of those things. And hey, where did you see that? Oh, I was in that same place. It lets you know that, A, people have heard you, B, people have come and found your content, but also they've also experienced this. And so that's my goal. I mean, that was the goal. It was A, therapeutic for me to just finally share my story after holding it in all those years. And then now subsequent stories, but B, to get their stories, to hear, what they've seen, what they've heard. And hopefully the more of us that do this, the more podcasts there are, the more content that's created, thoughtfully, the more people will see it, the more people that have seen something weird and don't know where to go will start to go, well, maybe it's that Bigfoot thing that, when I was out fishing and something was throwing rocks at me, or maybe it was that Bigfoot thing when I thought there was some wild man in the woods chopping wood, some long bearded, I don't know, hippie that, just decided to go off grid. Now, not to say that those people aren't there either. They might be right. But I think a lot of people have these things in the back of their heads and they wonder, but was that what I told myself it was? And the more people they hear tell something similar, something they heard, something they saw, a description of the thing, even as outlandish as it might be, I've heard somewhere it was like, I'd see a picture. I was like, oh, there's no way that's somebody's like costume or mask. And then somebody's like, no, that's exactly what I saw. So again, it's forced me into a more open skepticism. Skeptical, don't take everything completely, take everything with a grain of salt, but don't think just because I haven't seen it, I haven't heard it, I haven't smelled it, that somebody else didn't see, hear, or smell something that was not the same as what I did. Because if I saw something that they didn't see, if I smelled something that they didn't smell, if I heard something that they didn't hear, then what they're saying, what they're telling you passionately is probably true, especially if they're trembling, if they've got signs of trauma when they're telling their story. Those ones really get to me because I know how I felt initially when I started sharing my story. It made me relive it, and that reliving in the beginning was, I don't want to say it was traumatic, but it was visceral. You could feel that situation again that you were in when you had that encounter. And in those scarier encounters, it's almost as I'm telling a story, I can see myself out of body having the encounter as I'm telling it.
Yeah, that's what trauma does.
I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to wrap. I had no idea it was so late.
Well, I'm glad that we filled the time.
I
was like, man, I haven't had any encounters in a couple of years. I hope we have something to talk about.
God, I think we covered more ground than you could ever comprehend.
Yeah.
And it's a long show, one of our longest, but we had kind of a late start. So we appreciate everybody sticking with us tonight. We'll make sure that problem doesn't happen next week. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Thank you.
Guys.
We love you.
Yeah, thank you, audience, for your questions.
Yeah, we're going to get you back sooner this time.
Well, once this movie's out, I'll be happy to come back.
Okay.
Maybe I'll be starting on the next set of research and be able to contribute to your next project with some of the audio stuff I want to do.
Yep. And here's some wisdom that all of us can follow as we do our research, that you have not failed at what you want to accomplish. No, you've just found more. You've found a few ways that it doesn't work. And that's kind of how I go at this. Don't give up. Keep trying it. That didn't work. Try this. Don't worry about it. So with that,
each time I get an answer, I get two more questions. And to the questions in the audience, thank you guys. I'm in. If you're ever out visiting, or if you live anywhere near Crescent City, California, that's where I'm located. And most of my research I do here in Del Norte County or just across the border in Curry County. But I also go as far as the next counties over, Siskiyou, and up into Jefferson. So anybody in those regions, or if you're visiting and over the summer, we're a tourist destination here right on the coast, please send me a message, and be happy to get together with you and tell you some of my stories in person.
Yeah, great. With that, let's say goodnight. We'll be back next week. I don't know. Do you know who our guest is, Jeff? If you don't know off the top of your head, that's fine. He's just like, no, I don't know.
That's why I write it down, so I don't remember.
Yeah,
written down.
We're old. We're old. We don't remember crap. But on your way out, if you liked what you heard tonight, please subscribe, hit the bell, you know, all the crap. Leave us a nice comment, not a mean one. Give us a thumbs up, and we will be back next week, same time, same channel. Goodbye. Good night, everybody. We love you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
I call you up in the middle of the night. Been bothered by dreams, ain't feeling alright. You give me comfort, say just give it some time. By the end of our talk, I'm feeling just fine. You and I will always know where we belong. This ain't no ordinary love we got going on. I'll pick you up in my 59 Ford. We head on down the